A young man named Harold is praised for his good work. He is grateful and smiles. Someone asked what had happened to him because he was in a great mood. These same people want to say something else after him, but Harold ran away. Harold looks very happy. He is in a hurry somewhere and at the same time smiles broadly at his joyful thoughts. It turns out that his own house is waiting for him, which was finished building only yesterday. This is his cherished house. However, Harold was in for a terrifying surprise. His wonderful brand new house is in great danger. A fire started and Harold's house caught fire. Bright flames enveloped the beautiful house, and Harold fell to his knees in despair, unable to believe it. When Harold saw what was happening to his brand new dream home, he became hysterical. He cries in 3 streams and screams loudly that his house is on fire. But as they say, the goddess of luck comes to someone who has had a misfortune. Standing dejectedly on the ashes, Harold is in shock. His eyes are still full of tears. He can't believe what his eyes are seeing. At this time, the city continues to live its life. Passers-by rush through the streets and kids run around. The view of the beautiful city with neat houses and a castle in the distance is replaced by the view of Harold walking dejectedly through the noisy streets. After what happened, he walks mechanically and slowly. Wherever he looks, he is still in shock. Harold stopped on the street in the middle of a crowd of people, gloomily looking at the people in front of him. The recently cheerful and joyful Harold is gloomy. He thinks that everything is over for him, and he no longer cares what happens next. Harold wonders why this happened, and that when he returned from work yesterday, the fire had already started. So at least it didn't start through his fault. But Harold doesn't understand what the reason is, and if arson suddenly happened. Harold, looking haggard, continues to gloomily think that if the house was going to be burned down anyway, then it would be better if it was another place. Then 2 guys caught his attention, one asking the other if it was a magic sword. Harold listens in silence as the guy with the magic sword brags to the interlocutor that he is going to the middle-level maze to earn money there. His interlocutor cried out in surprise. He did not believe what he had heard. Harold, as if in a fog, continues to reflect. He has not heard. Then you can earn money in the maze. However, for him personally, none of this matters, because he has no skill, no sword, no magic, and his strength and intelligence are the most ordinary. Harold thinks resignedly about how he worked hard for 25 years, because he clearly understood what he needed. Clenching his hand into a fist, he seemed to have decided something for himself. Harold lifts his head up into the cloudy skies and lets out a long sigh of despair. He says out loud that he wants money. He is sure that if he had enough money, then everything would not be so deplorable. Remembering about the money, Harold sighs thoughtfully and asks himself how much money he has left in his account. Entering the bank building, Harold turned to a specialist, and the girl at the counter mildly informed him that his balance was 15 million. Harold looks gloomily at his bank statement and reflects that 15 million is a month's salary for a simple worker. And that's all his condition at the moment. He doesn't know what else to say because he's worked so hard so far. Harold recalls that earlier, in addition to his main job, Harold also had such difficult times when he collected mountain wild plants and medicinal herbs and then sold them in bulk. Continuing to remember, Harold fatally thinks that in the end, the money savings from his hard work amounted to 2,000 million, and for the most part, he spent them on building his dream home. Closing his eyes, Harold stated that he did not like the state of things in which he found himself. Still indifferently, he informs the bank employee standing in front of him that he will withdraw all the money he has from the account. Having emptied his bank account, Harold again slowly wanders through the crowded streets of the city. He thinks that even though he doesn't have much money left, he's still going to use it right now. Smiling sadly at his very unhappy thoughts, Harold drooped. He lowered his head and seemed about to cry again. He thinks distantly that because of the fire that has occurred, he is now in complete despair. Suddenly, Harold raised his hands in the air as if he was in a deliberately joyful excitement. Apparently, he decides that since this has happened, he will not be discouraged, but will go and eat something delicious. Then his gaze fell on some kind of sign on the side of the street. He looks at it in surprise and automatically thinks that maybe he should dare to gamble in order to get money. However, it turned out that the sign that attracted Harold's attention says that there are no gambling games here, but the place of the slave auction. Harold continues to stand by and ponder what he should do. Finally, Harold realized the meaning of what was written on the sign. near which he had been standing for some time. He is surprised by what is written there. Even in this country, he had heard more than once about deals with slaves, but such auctions were rare. Noticing that Harold was thinking on the threshold, the auction manager turns to him, who greets him and informs him that he has come to a great place. He asks if Harold will participate in the auction. He was taken aback and did not know what to say. When Harold heard the auction manager's offer, he became worried. He leaned back and began waving his hands and hastily protesting, telling the steward that he did not have the money to buy a slave at auction. Harold immediately thought to himself that a slave is an object of luxury, and the price for some does not fall below 200 million. Harold is very surprised that the manager offered him such a thing, and what he thought of him, he is far from wealthy. The auctioneer spread his hands as if startled by Harold's words. He asks him not to say that, because the price of some lots at auction starts from 1 million. And if he's lucky, the deal may be profitable for him. Harold automatically asks the auction manager if the price of the lot will not increase in this case, and he waved his finger and cunningly replied that it depended on whether Harold would have competitors for the lot he liked. The manager continues and informs Harold that sometimes everything depends on the starting price, and if it is low, it will have a bad effect on the organizers. But this, according to the manager, is the most interesting thing in his profession. The auction manager once again asks Harold for permission to say something and enthusiastically informs him that everything will definitely be fine even if Harold just goes inside to look and does not buy anything. It seems that Harold has finally been distracted from his trouble. He squinted thoughtfully, thinking that it would be nice to just look. After all, it doesn't really matter if he buys something there or not. In general, it's interesting. Harold carefully asks the steward if he needs to pay for admission. The auction manager is incredibly glad that Harold is interested. He pats him on the shoulder in a friendly way and informs him that there is no need to pay for admission. He invites him in. Visitors can see a spacious hall with an elevation and a stage. Heavy curtains are visible on one side of the stage. All kinds of people, both men and women, are sitting around. Finally entering the door, Harold looks around. He is a little confused and at the same time surprised that he was here. But he immediately realizes that this hall full of people with a stage in the middle is the place for the auction. Harold, entering the door, even froze in surprise, trying to realize where he had just got to and what was happening in the hall. He stands and looks around, probably not knowing how to behave further at this event. Suddenly, Harold saw one empty seat among the crowd. It looked like it was the last one. Still looking around in surprise, Harold sat down and realized that the manager had called him, since the lack of available seats supports the competitive spirit. Harold looks around in surprise and suddenly hears the voice of the auction manager, who addresses the ladies and gentlemen present and thanks them for taking the time and deigning to attend their auction. Bowing, the manager informs them that they are a group that travels the world, finds interesting lots, and then puts them up for sale at auction. The manager said that he guarantees that there will definitely be something that they will all like. Harold, sitting in his seat a little away from the stage, listens to a talkative manager who tells the specifics of the auction. He automatically thinks that the manager is a traveling merchant. Harold was momentarily enveloped in sad thoughts about recent events. He smiles sadly and thinks that since his precious house burned down, then why doesn't he try to travel the world like this in search of adventure and money? Meanwhile, the manager continues to talk about how the auction is going on and informs the assembled public that after the presentation of the lot is over, he will begin to accept cash bids from those who want to own it. The auction manager once again politely bowed to the audience and cunningly winked at them from the stage and informed them that the right to purchase the named lot would be given to the one who would raise his hand and offer the largest amount of money. The manager seems to have finished explaining the rules of the event. He theatrically spread his arms out to the sides and informs the audience that their auction is starting and the manager is about to announce what the first lot is. First of all, the manager brought a girl on stage in a very revealing outfit. Harold, seeing her, screamed in amazement and stared at her without taking his eyes off her. The girl who came out first turned out to be none other than an elf. This is a lovely forest beauty. The manager informs the amazed audience that elves are very rare in large cities, and that's why she is truly amazing. Harold forgot about everything. He opened his mouth in surprise and continues to stare in amazement at the elf girl standing on the stage. He wonders how it could happen that someone like her ended up at such an auction. The manager describes the advantages with knowledge. She has excellent looks and is also proficient in magic and the ancient Elvish language. No matter who you are, an aristocrat, a merchant, or a hero, you will not find another like her. The auction manager has finished describing the lot. He slyly winks and greets visitors, and then loudly announces that the starting price for the lot, just described as 200 million. Harold, hearing the price, looks at him in shock. The visitors surrounding the stage began furiously shouting their bets, trying to outbid the competitors. The sums of 300 million are heard, then 580 million, someone gives a billion, and someone already offers 2,900 million for the lot. Harold watches in shock. He hears how the auction participants are already offering 6,230 million and 6,330 million. And the manager loudly clarifies whether someone will offer more. The manager, after examining the rows of auction participants, loudly announces that he does not see any more bids from anyone, which means that the lot was sold for 6,330 million. The steward announced the winner of the joyfully smiling man in armor. The manager continued his auction further, and Harold thinks it's all incredible. Yes, she is undoubtedly very beautiful and unusual, but Harold somehow did not notice any special value in her. The manager also continued the auction. The people surrounding Harold shouted and called 150 million, then 300 million, then 400 million, then 400 million, then 800 million, then 800 million. Harold listens wearily as the manager shouts and as the visitors who have dispersed echo him. The sums instantly become prohibitively huge, and that's how the roof will go. And so the manager loudly announces that the final lot is about to be held. When Harold heard that the manager was about to show the last lot, he was relieved that it was finally over. But then Harold cried out in extreme surprise, because the last lot turned out to be extremely unusual. The reason for everyone's shock and surprise was the fact that the last copy that the steward presented was a dark elf. The manager, very encouraged by the success of the event, loudly asks if there are any interested parties. Meanwhile, the dark elf stood listlessly and listened to the steward introduce her. She did not say a word and did not look at the audience in the hall. Probably, she was not very interested in what was happening. The people present who had recently participated so emotionally during the auction fell silent in amazement. There is a mixture of surprise, shock, and fear on their faces. When the first shock passed, the people in the hall began to talk, anxiously asking each other if this was really a dark elf. It is believed that if you contact someone like her, you can even lose your life. The manager, who was already mentally preparing to hear the joyful hum of the enthusiastic crowd, was very surprised when he heard what they were saying about her there. The people in the hall continue to mutter discontentedly, and Harold thinks that the elves have been opposed to the rest of the world for a long time, and that he can understand the fear of these people, because dark elves are creatures that bring misfortune to anyone who contacts them. Harold remembers from childhood that many children's parables and educational techniques are based on this myth about dark elves, and that in his country, adults have a widespread legend that dark elves come to naughty children and bring them misfortune. Looking thoughtfully around, Harold thinks that dark elves are even rarer than ordinary ones, but many people do not know about this. People in the hall continue to talk about various horrors that have happened to those who took the risk and contacted the dark elves. The steward is very worried. He informs the audience that the elf is young, innocent, has some knowledge of magic, can do household chores and accompany a companion on various adventures, and also has an excellent style. The people present are clearly skeptical. They are silent and avoid looking at the steward and the dark elf. And then someone shouts to the surprised steward that on their continent dark elves are called unclean. In response to dissatisfied conversations and shouts from the people present, the manager indignantly shouts in response that everything is set up differently on different continents, and that some people believe that innocent dark elves bring great luck to a person. Harold, looking at how desperately the steward praises the positive qualities and features of the dark elf in front of the audience, thinks that all this is like drawing lots, and that maybe he expected this elf to make a splash. Harold, looking at the steward, continues to think. He figured that he probably came from another continent and therefore was not aware of local rumors, and it seems that he greatly underestimated the dislike of the dark elves among the inhabitants of the northeastern lands. The auction manager became even more agitated. He began to realize that he had made a mistake, but he did not shut up. Flushed and bulging, he shouts to the audience that he has excellent service and that the starting amount of the specified lot is only 15 million. After hearing the emotional words of the auction manager, Harold is very surprised again. He looks at it admiringly and thinks that, apparently, this is a matter of pride, and he lives off auctions like this. And then it suddenly dawned on Harold. He mechanically repeats to himself the initial amount of the lot, which the manager has just announced to the whole hall. And this amount is only 15 million. At the same time, the auction manager is tensely waiting for a reaction from the gathered people. But there was a tense silence in the hall. The manager shouts that really no one is interested in his generous offer. The unfortunate auctioneer is in shock. He froze in amazement, twisting his frightening face at the fact that no one accepted his offer. And suddenly, someone raised his hand and calmly offered 15 million. All the people gathered in the hall are shocked. At the same time, they looked at the one who dared to agree to the manager's proposal. This brave man turned out to be Harold, sitting on the edge. The crowd, frozen for a moment, began to make noise. Harold continued to sit quietly with his hand raised. But now people in the hall began to shout in surprise that this was impossible, and that really someone had dared to make such a decision. They don't understand if he's serious. The dark elf, who became the center of attention in this hall, and who was so diligently praised by the steward and so emotionally discussed by the people in the hall, was silent. Harold, who carefully pretended that he did not hear and did not see the reaction from the people around him, cautiously looks at the manager. He thinks it's hardly a coincidence that he has exactly 15 million, but he only came to look. Harold continues to hold his hand up and mentally tells himself that he personally does not dislike her. In addition, he believes that he is not one of those people who will just believe rumors about someone he has never met before. Harold suddenly felt sad. He is sure that even if all those rumors about the dark elf that people discussed here turn out to be true, then he still has nothing more to lose now. The manager, who hears that someone in the hall has decided on the announced amount, happily waves his hands, attracting the attention of other people. He repeats the amount and encourages them to participate, because if they miss the opportunity, it will never happen again. However, despite all the efforts of the manager, all the people in the hall still look at each other disapprovingly and even fearfully, not daring to go against established opinions. The manager's despair has reached its limit. Closing his eyes, he shouts that since no one else supports the bet, the lot goes for 15 million to Harold. This announcement shocked everyone present. The manager counts the cash and reports that he has received 15 million. He informs Harold that he has made a very successful purchase, such a rare lot for only 15 million. And in the West, it would have cost him 16 billion. Harold asked if the manager would cancel the deal. He denies that trust is the main thing in his business. This time, the auction was successful, the figures are off the scale, and he made a lot of money. Now he is ready to hand over his acquisition to Harold. The steward, politely addressing, asks Harold to drop some of his blood on a special neck accessory, which he later needs to put on his dark elf. Harold incomprehensibly asks the steward what he needs to do. Does he really need his blood? He confirmed it. This is necessary in order to perform the imprinting procedure, which informs that the dark elf is now under his influence. The manager explains that the accessory will allow him to capture himself as a gentleman, and if he touches it with his finger, a needle will pop out and prick his finger so that the drop of blood necessary for the procedure appears. No one but Harold will be able to take it off the elf. Very worried, Harold follows the instructions of the steward, and imprinting himself as a master, he puts this special accessory on the neck of the dark elf. Now they are closely connected by the procedure performed. Harold looks straight into the eyes of the dark elf and calmly explains to her that as soon as he put this accessory on her, he became her master. The dark elf, on the other hand, looks at him wide-eyed and agrees in amazement, thanking him for this. The dark elf, who had not shown much interest in what was happening before, now attentively and in surprise examines herself in the accessory that the man who called himself her master had just put on her. Smiling amiably and looking at the dark elf standing in front of him, Harold, as if by the way, informs that he still does not know her name. The dark elf started in surprise. The dark elf is very confused. Apparently she is still in shock from everything that is happening. But at the same time, she can't take her eyes off Harold. She hesitated a little while looking at him, and then tells him that her name is Ati. Still smiling amiably, Harold slyly winked at the young dark elf with whom he was now connected, and replied that her name sounded very cute, and that his name is Harold. And his full name sounds like Harold Smith. A dark elf named Adi looks at him with open eyes and thoughtfully calls him Harold Sama in her own way. Then she suddenly looked at him even more intently and seemed to want to ask him something but did not dare to do this audacity. But Harold still noticed how the dark elf Atai had been staring at him for some time without taking her eyes off him. He stopped in surprise and after a little hesitation asked her what was the matter. Maybe something had happened to her. The young dark elf Atai was terribly embarrassed when she realized that Harold had noticed her curiosity directed at him. She hurriedly turned away, saying that she was fine. Harold thought about it, but she suddenly said that she was glad that he was good. It seemed that for the first time since the vicissitudes of fate brought Harold together with this unusual girl from the dark elf race, she smiled, looking directly at him, and not at all afraid of it. Harold himself also suddenly thought about it. He suddenly realized that despite the fact that his dream house burned down just yesterday and he lost everything along with it, things were not so bad. His life has changed quite abruptly, and he completely unplanned acquired a young companion from the dark elf race named Ati, with whom he is still connected by the imprinting procedure. Harold's hands suddenly appeared on the sides of the surprised dark elf Ati and deftly threw a hooded cloak over her, which very successfully covered her exotic appearance from prying eyes. It automatically raised her hands in a defensive movement, trying to cover her ears. She does not want them to be visible. But then she realized that Harold had done just that, by throwing the hood over her. Harold just smiled at her and agreed with her words. Suddenly, both Harold and Adi stared in surprise at something in front of them. Both of them had already left the room where the auction had been held earlier and were on the street of the city. Harold and Ati saw a smugly smiling man in armor, proudly waving at the people around him. This man was accompanied by a very beautiful elf girl with a frowning expression. The expression on the face of the beautiful elf who walked next to the smug knight who also participated in the auction did not bode well. But it seems that something she saw on the street caused her even more dissatisfaction. Ati, walking with Harold past the man in armor and his elf companion, turned away with displeasure so as not to meet that gaze. Surprisingly, the oncoming elf also turned away when she saw Ati and Harold on her way. Seeing a mute question in the eyes of Harold, who was extremely surprised, Ati hurriedly began to explain. She said that it was nothing. It was just that the dark elves didn't really get along with ordinary elves, and that's why they had such a situation now. Harold thought seriously, looking attentively at Ati, who was confused and wrapped in a cloak. He reflects that it could probably be something personal, or perhaps this dislike has to do with the entire race of dark elves in general. However, this is not all. Harold fell into even more serious thoughts. His face betrays how painful these thoughts are for him. He doesn't know what to do next. He would really like to go home now, but it can't be done by itself. Aishi was distracted from her thoughts about meeting an ordinary elf right on a crowded street and looked attentively at Harold, and he hesitantly tries to begin explaining his living situation and mumbles something unintelligible. Embarrassed, Harold tells Adi that they can't go to his house because his house burned down, and he spent his last money at an auction where he met young Adi. Therefore, you will not be able to stay in a hotel either. Suddenly, Harold had an idea. He happily informs Adi that he remembers that there is an old abandoned hut at the foot of the mountain where no one lives. And he suddenly thought that today he and the dark elf Adi could spend the night there. After listening attentively to his master Harold's confused explanations about the state of things, Ati tells him that there is nothing wrong with that. She stares at him intently and continues to wrap herself in his cloak, given to her earlier in the city. Harold stopped, startled, as if he had realized something. He looks very carefully at the nondescript, but at the same time too open outfit of the dark elf Adi, which makes her feel not very comfortable. The whole outfit of the young dark elf so consists of a cheap dress, bracelets, and the very cloak that Harold threw on her when they left the auction. With a truly childlike directness, Ati asks Harold what is wrong. Now it was Harold's turn to be embarrassed. He realized that his examination had been delayed. He hurriedly took his eyes off her body and informed his companion that everything was fine. But he thought he should buy normal clothes for her. Young Adi looked at her clothes in surprise. She thoughtfully feels the dress and seems to evaluate what she is wearing. After a short pause, she tells Harold that in her opinion, buying new clothes for her is not necessary at all. And then, remembering his plight, Harold laughs nervously and explains to Adi that he actually doesn't have the money for this. But he informs her that despite this, they will be fine and that he will definitely come up with something. Harold suddenly stopped talking to himself. He is amazed to think about what he just said to the dark elf 80 standing in front of him. Had he really told her that everything was fine and even promised that he would come up with something? When he comes to himself, Harold begins to smile in a special way at his behavior in front of the dark elf 80, who happened to meet at the auction, and his thoughts about everything that is happening. Continuing to smile, Harold thinks that even though he has lost his home, his life has improved a little. He can't believe he's already started to recover from that tragedy. He says that it would be good to know what Ati would like. The dark elf Ati, after carefully listening to the arguments and explanations of her master Harold, resolutely answers him that it is not necessary right now, but in the future she will really need weapons and armor. Hearing such a statement, Harold fell silent in surprise and stared at her. Ati clenches her fists and tells him that if there is no money, then they need to go to the maze. Even if they don't go very far, they can still make some money there. And then, clenching her fists, the dark elf Ati tells Harold that she actually has experience in passing mazes. And even if the two of them go somewhere together, it absolutely does not mean that they will be left completely without money. Startled by her words about the maze, Harold began to recall the words of the steward that the dark elf owns magic and has experience in passing mazes, and also about the conversation between two guys that you can earn money at the middle level of the maze. A little embarrassed, Ati says that it is already obvious to her that dark elves do not really fit into these places. Therefore, she dared to assume that in this case, it would be problematic for her to simply work for the benefit of Mr. Harold here. Abruptly turning around, Ati asked Mr. Harold to watch her actions. She quickly bent down and deftly picked up a suitable-sized pebble from the ground. Harold remained silent. With an elusive movement, a small dark elf named Ati made an incredible maneuver, swung, and with a clear practice movement threw the stone she had picked up into the sky, instantly knocking down a bird flying by. Shot down by a young dark elf, the bird fell from the sky straight to the feet of Harold, who was struck to the depths of his soul, who could not even utter anything. He just stood there and watched this unexpected maneuver of his companion, continuing to stand and stare with bulging eyes at the downed bird lying at his feet. Harold finally asks in shock if his companion is joking that she has such impressive skills in his opinion. The dark elf anxiously states that it turned out to be quite awkward for her, and therefore managed to catch only one bird. If she had some kind of weapon, such as a bow, she would have hooked at least 3 birds at a time. Harold thinks he will learn a little more about magic and that Adi will be able to survive in the maze. He suggests that she start preparing. But even if she is confident in her abilities, it is dangerous there and that she should return if it becomes difficult for her there. Because the main thing is to survive. Harold says he doesn't want to get hurt himself, so you need to be careful. In response to his concern, a confused Ati smiles and says that Harold-sama should not worry. She will definitely protect him. After finishing the conversation, they set off on their way. As he follows her towards the forest hut, a smiling Harold confusedly thinks that this is the first time he has seen the smile of his dark elf named Atai. Suddenly, Harold had a shocking thought. Changing his face, he wonders what she meant when she promised that she would protect him. And would he also have to go into the maze and fight there with the dark elf? When he finally reaches a small hut surrounded by trees, located at the foot of the mountain, Harold tells the elf Atai that although no one lives in this hut now, it is quite clean both outside and inside. It turned out that Harold looked after this hut and sometimes came here. He told the surprised Ati that at the time when he earned a house, this hut was useful to him, as he collected wild herbs and plants for sale here. The dark elf Ati listened to Harold and, clenching her fists, seriously informs him that she will immediately cook something for them to eat. There are dishes and a stove in the hut, so Harold agrees with the proposal of his young companion Ati. Tired of the massive emotions and events of today, the dark elf Ati curled up after eating and fell asleep near the stove. Obviously, she was very tired of everything she had gone through during this difficult day for both of them. Harold smiles contentedly at how peacefully she sniffs. Deciding to take care, he carries a blanket to carefully cover the sleeping young elf, with whom he was connected by the unexpected and strange events of that day. Suddenly, the dark elf 80 shuddered and instantly woke up. It turned out that her sleep was very light. Blushing, she stared blankly at Harold, who came up to her, which seemed to confuse him as well. Harold is worried. He smiles guiltily at the dark elf At and asks if everything is okay, and immediately informs her that he actually wasn't going to do anything strange with her. He just brought a blanket to cover her up. Frozen for a moment in surprise, the dark elf Ati confusedly thanks Mr. Harold for his concern for her. Obviously, at first, she was afraid of what might happen. When the dark elf Ati realized that everything was fine and that Harold just wanted to take care of her, she fell asleep again, covering herself with the blanket he brought. And Harold smiles again, looking at her and stating that she seems to have fallen asleep again. Looking at the back of the dark elf E.T., sleeping near the stove, Harold automatically thinks that she is probably still afraid that she may be attacked at any moment. And if that's really the case, then he needs to be even more careful. Very carefully removing a strand of hair from the face of the soundly sleeping dark elf Eddie, Harold thinks that she is still afraid that someone might touch her. He also thinks that since she is a servant, she should be partly prepared for such a turn. Harold continues to stare at the serene expression of the sleeping young dark elf named Adie in front of him. Her bangs cover part of her face, and she wears the same accessory around her neck that connects them to Harold. After looking at the sleeping young elf's face too much, Harold became very confused about his thoughts. He shuddered, made a face and ruffled his hair, as if to ward off unnecessary obsessive thoughts about the dark elf. There is a sound above the trees. It sounds like the trampling of many armored feet. They're making a noise that's getting louder. Hearing him, the dark elf, Ati, woke up, and Harold tensed up. A whole squad of armored warriors is indeed moving through the forest in an unknown direction, whose loud trampling has alarmed birds and animals, as well as disturbed Adie and Harold, who are still in the forest hut. Harold, who got out, decided to see what the noise was, and under the cover of the trees, he quietly watched the people walking. It turned out to be a squad of Imperial soldiers. But Harold hasn't heard anything about it. I wonder what's going on in the east. Returning to the hut, Harold told them all about what they had seen nearby in the forest when A.T. woke up. He doesn't quite understand what's going on in the Empire right now, and whether what is happening will eventually escalate into a full-scale war. At breakfast, the dark elf A.T. sits on the floor and listens attentively to Harold's story about what he saw in the forest, and about his concern about life in the country. Then she tells him that everything she has heard from him now is even a little frightening. Harold is surprised that something like that can scare her. He looked at her and thoughtfully asks that perhaps his dark elf companion A.T. would like to go with him to some other place, away from here. Elf Body was confused by this question. She hesitantly clarifies whether Harold is sure that this is even possible. Harold smiles at her contentedly. He's sure. He replies that everything is fine, but they need to earn money to travel. Harold asks the dark elf A.T. again if there is any specific place where she might want to go on a trip. Elf A.T. closed her eyes and thought about the answer. She was just silent for a few minutes. And suddenly, as if deciding on something important, she leaned forward a little and looking fervently at Harold, asked him that if this could be done, then she would really like to go to the southern part of the continent, namely to the Astarte Canyon. Harold replied that in that case they would go there. He thinks that the most profitable way to get there is by ferry, and that if he wants to make money in the maze, then he needs A.T. But all he has is his late father's spear. The dark elf A.T., looking intently at Harold, asks if he is not interested in finding out what is there. He squinted. Yes, since she's brought it up. He agrees that it's true. He's really interested in finding out what's in the maze. And then, looking at the elf Adi, Harold decided something for himself. He carefully sat down next to her on the floor, which caused her surprise. He calmly clarifies that Adi is now his servant. She hesitated a little with surprise, but it's true, which she agrees with. Suddenly, Harold stroked the dark elf Eight's cheek, causing her to blush, and said that in that case, A.T. could not just leave him. He gently took her chin and informed her that he was not going to let her go from him. And after these words, Harold approached and softly kissed the confused dark elf A.T. Suddenly he became embarrassed, jumped up abruptly and ruffled his hair and said that the point was that if she wanted to say something, then let her say it because she was very important to him. The dark elf A.T., completely taken aback by what was happening, sat in a stupor for several moments. And then there was an explosion of emotions, and the whole range of feelings from Harold's kiss began to be read on her face. Harold, also confused, squinted while 80 tried to put his thoughts in order and say something intelligible. Blushing madly with embarrassment, she asks him if his words mean that she is important, that she is no longer just his servant. Harold decided to keep silent for now, and stands with his back to the Elfati. And she, also without looking at him, continues to sit and comprehend what just happened between her and Mr. Harold. The eyes of the young dark elf 80 were clouded with either embarrassment, delight, or even shame. Squinting her eyes sideways, she clearly remembers what happened just now and tries to find the right words to express her emotions. Finally, the dark elf 80 was able to put her thoughts together. Still embarrassed and blushing furiously, she touches her lips with her fingers and, as if to herself, quietly tells herself that this was actually her first kiss. In an attempt to start training, Harold went to the city to earn money. Standing at the door of a familiar shop, he thinks that he is quite embarrassed right now. However, despite the despair that has come over him, he still needs to get back to work. Going inside the shop, Harold tells himself that he needs to earn money to go through the maze and he wants to work here a little and leave. He really hopes that they won't shout at him. Then the shopkeeper appeared. Both he and Harold chuckle in surprise. Suddenly, the shopkeeper, who came out of the inner room, changed his face so much that it began to resemble a terrifying mask. Harold, seeing such a change in his appearance, was seriously scared and mentally began to pray to the gods. But suddenly, instead of strongly scolding Harold, the shopkeeper burst into tears and rushed to him with hugs and cries of joy that it was Harold and that it turned out he was alive. The shopkeeper began to lament that it was wrong to come so suddenly without saying anything. He remembered that he had sensed something was wrong and went to Harold's new house, but it turned out that the house had already burned down. When the shopkeeper calmed down from his experience, he and Harold sat in the back room and slowly discussed everything that happened to him over the past few days. And then the shopkeeper thoughtfully said that now he understood everything. After all that he heard, the shopkeeper thoughtfully states that it turns out Harold was going to earn money for living by going to the maze for this. But he does not understand why he needed funds for training for this. The shopkeeper also does not understand why Harold intends to go to the southern continent again. Harold hesitated to answer but said it was necessary. He didn't go into details, probably not telling about the dark elf and the auction. The shopkeeper narrowed his eyes thoughtfully, then sighed heavily and stated understandingly that Harold probably had some circumstances about which he could not tell him right here and now. Then the shopkeeper abruptly got up and went somewhere, asking the surprised Harold to wait for him here for a while and not go anywhere. Harold looks after him uncomprehendingly and seems to tacitly agree. Upon returning, the shopkeeper abruptly threw a decent bag of cash on the table in front of Harold and informed him that he had this for him, which caused Harold to exclaim in surprise, mixed with sincere gratitude for such a generous gift. Harold is worried. He politely informs the shopkeeper with gratitude and a slightly guilty look that when a teacher does good to a student, the student responds in kind. After all, the good is always mutual and returns to the person. The shopkeeper is serious. He informs Harold that this is actually the money he originally set aside to give him. And if Harold says that he will leave this place soon, then the shopkeeper believes that he simply has to give them to him right now. The shopkeeper informs Harold that he has worked conscientiously in his shop for 15 years and can regard this money as a modest payment for dismissal. Harold is very impressed, and tears came to his eyes. He thanks the owner for his help. Harold-sama, who has returned to the forest hut, is greeted by the dark elf Ati. Harold, looking admiringly at the beautiful fried chicken, praises the elf Ati for cooking him something to eat. Harold smiles and thanks Ati, and he also informs the surprised elf that he has earned some money and that tomorrow he and Ati will go and buy weapons for the maze. And to top it off, he said that he brought Ati a small present and immediately handed it over. Ati looks at the gift from Harold with surprise and admiration. It turned out to be a cute little hat. Harold explains that this hat is needed to hide the ears from prying eyes. Or maybe she would like to have some other hat. Dark Elf Ati, looking confusedly at the smiling Harold's face from under her new hat, is slightly surprised. She thanks him a little haltingly for the beautiful gift, saying that she likes everything and that she will take care of this hat with all her might. The next day, Harold and his dark elf Ati came to the gun store, where they immediately faced difficulties choosing weapons. After all, each of the presented models has its advantages and disadvantages. Harold doesn't even know what to say. The dark elf Ati and Harold carefully examine the assortment of weapons that are hung on the walls and placed on the counters in the gun store. There are absolutely different weapons available for all occasions and needs. Having properly reviewed the entire assortment presented in the store, a dark elf named At confidently tells Harold, who is confused by the large selection, that she has already made her choice based on what they have here. Skillfully holding a rather serious weapon with an optical sight in her hands, the dark elf At informs her master Harold that this type of weapon is suitable for them for their upcoming trip to the labyrinth. Standing at the counter with the seller staring at her in surprise and confidently holding a rifle with the telescopic sight in her hands, the dark elf At confidently informs Mr. Harold that she has definitely decided and wants this version of the weapon. The smiling salesman in the shop seems to approve of her choice. He inquiringly asked if she really needed this sniper rifle, and if so, it will cost Harold and her an amount equal to 50,000. Harold is pleased that she likes everything, but he thinks that Ati could have chosen a more expensive weapon. But the dark elf thoughtfully replies that the price is one of the reasons she chose this type of weapon to go into the maze. Ati tells Harold that she really wanted a firearm. Glancing sideways at the wall with the weapon, she adds that the magic bow will certainly be stronger than ordinary firearms. But the point here is different. Harold automatically looked at the wall with magic bows and was shocked to see that they were worth 6.8 million. At looked knowingly at the wall with bows and said that firearms have a plus because they have power, even if they are cheap. At continues to reason and tells Harold that although they will still need ammunition for the weapon she has chosen, the final price will still match the quality, especially if they do not waste it in vain. The disadvantage of the rifle is that it is very loud and is more difficult to aim from it than using a bow for this purpose. She says that, yes, the rifle has flaws, but they can improve the parts that make sound, and At is by nature a pretty good marksman. Harold silently watches how smartly and enthusiastically the dark elf At tells him about the disadvantages and advantages of the different types of weapons that are presented in the store. And he was surprised to realize that she was talking to him so calmly now. Harold realized that it looked like his dark elf companion, Adi, despite her youth, was interested in weapons and therefore was so happy to talk about this topic. Thinking about all this, Harold smiled again, and a blush entered his cheeks. Harold informs Adi, flushed with pleasure, that since she has decided so, then they take this sniper rifle with a telescopic sight. And in addition, he suggests that she also take a silencer for this rifle, so that it would be quieter. Upon hearing such an offer from Mr. Harold, the elf At enthusiastically clenched her fists and, with eyes shining with joy, asked him if he was sure of his generous offer. To which Harold naturally replied in the affirmative. Standing at the counter, At politely bowed her head in front of Mr. Harold. She confusedly thanks him for his generosity and promises that she will definitely be useful to him, having all the things that he has chosen for her now. Finally, At and Harold finished choosing things, and their shopping list included items such as a sniper rifle for 50,000, 20 sets of cartridges for 20,000, cartridge belts for 20,000, leather gloves for 10,000, and a silencer for 80,000. Harold watches the dark elf At with a satisfied expression on her face, who appeared already in full gear and a new dress. She slung a sniper rifle over her shoulder. At happily announces that everything is fine and that she is ready to go. Suddenly, the elf Adi turned back and was a little embarrassed to realize that her master Harold was silently standing behind her and just waiting for her to finish with her preparations for going into the maze. Harold is still smiling at his thoughts, but At sees that his clothes and equipment are now clearly different from hers. Harold is really very simply and inexpensively dressed, and he has only his father's old spear with him. Desperately embarrassed, the elf Ati tries to start a conversation about their appearance. She says that Harold Sama is in fact her master, and she is his servant, but at the same time he looks inappropriate for his status. Harold seems surprised by such a statement from the dark elf. He looks at her blankly, trying to figure out what she means. At continues, saying that he could pay attention to himself when he was looking for the best accessories for her. Harold finally understood what his elf companion was trying to tell him. He raised his hand in a conciliatory gesture and says that since their budget is still limited, in such a situation it is better to first supply her with weapons and equipment. Since she has some experience, he calms Ati down, saying that if they have money left, then he will buy something for himself. She asks him again if he is sure of this. Harold thinks he's sure of this. Harold thinks he's sure, but he also understands that all his current stuff is just an outrage. Clutching his simple weapon with both hands, Harold tries to assume a fighting pose with a smile. He realizes that his spear only looks sharp and dangerous from the outside, but this is not the case. However, unlike 80's equipment, his weapons can also be cheap. Harold realizes that he is weak as a warrior, so such a spear is the only thing he can use. But such weapons will break down quickly in the maze. Moreover, Harold is not sure that he will even have a chance to use it there. Standing next to 80, Harold thoughtfully tells her that, in fact, the kingdom itself controls the maze where they are going with her. After all, such a place with a lot of monsters threatens the well-being of the entire region. Harold continues the story, telling Ati, who listens attentively, that people who explore this maze sometimes become owners of the treasures of demons that they found in the maze. Their goal is to destroy as many different monsters there as possible, so that they do not get out of the maze and do not threaten the peaceful existence of the kingdom. After finishing his explanatory speech about the little that Harold knew about the maze and its dangers, he looks at Ati and says that this is about how things are where they intend to go. Harold thought about how he would really like his father to tell him more about this maze and its features, and the dangers that can await a person there. Harold remembers his childhood and training with a spear, and although he tried hard, his father always told him that he was not very capable. And that's why Harold was always sure that the maze and the battles were definitely not for him. Harold sadly recalls that his late father lived for the sake of exploring this maze, and that because of this, he was very widely known among the population. And Harold also remembers that one day 15 years ago, his father, as always, went to the maze with research and did not return. And not returning from the maze only meant that the person died there. The purpose of his father's research was to get to the deepest place in the maze. But Harold would really like his father to earn money in a safer way. And what could you expect from going into a narrow maze with a spear in your hands? As a child, Harold was always weak and frail. And when his father disappeared in the maze, his mother couldn't stand it all and died too. That's how Harold was left alone. Harold sadly remembered how he had recently asked the elf Ati not to risk herself in the maze and return if she felt that she could no longer cope. And now he hasn't even entered the maze yet, and already he feels that he can't cope. Harold's sad thoughts about the past and the untimely death of his parents were interrupted by the voice of a worried Ati. She asks if Harold Sama's hair is all right. Harold realized that he was too carried away by the memories. He smiles and immediately reassures her, saying that everything is fine and thanks her for knowing so much. Ati is very embarrassed by his praise. Quite unexpectedly, these simple words of Harold and his next praise made the dark elf feel embarrassed. She clenched her fists and looked away, blushing again, asking him not to tell her such embarrassing things. Finally, Harold and the elf Atai reached the right place. Harold states with satisfaction that this is the maze. He is surprised how many people here want to enter the maze. Atai stares in silence. And then someone shouted loudly at them and asked them to wait. A man approached Harold and his companion 80, and Harold realized from his outfit that this was a guardian who was watching the maze. He clarifies whether you need to pay for admission. The guardian informs them that admission is free, but he asks them to pay attention to one small problem. Harold and Ati don't understand what the problem is. The guardian says that the fact is that they recently found out that a very dangerous monster is walking around the maze. The guardian reports that they gathered the knights, but they did not find the monster. And since he did not show up anymore, the search was stopped. But you still need to be on the alert. Harold whispers something in Ati's ear. He asks what 80 thinks about it. She says that if there are one or two monsters, then maybe. And although she had made mistakes before, but not this time, she resolutely clenched her fist and suggests that he show more vigilance in the maze. Then someone screams about a monster and an imminent demise. Harold and 80 are surprised. They see a bunch of people coming to the entrance of the maze, pushing aside everyone on the way, including the guard. The newcomers, seeing Harold and Ati, consider them bad and suggest that they turn around and go home right now. One of the young men mockingly asks Harold what kind of spear Harold is holding and that he really decided to go into the maze with him. Continuing to mock Harold, they compared him to the pioneer Edwin Smith. It seems one of them once admired him. But now he does not see the point, because Smith died. Harold is in shock. Are they really talking about Edwin Smith? But that's exactly the name of his late father, the Maze Explorer. Harold is thinking something about the names of the legendary pioneers, when suddenly the same young man noticed 80. He thinks she is very cute in his hat. Having lost all decency, he notices that she has a big uniform, and that he likes such girls. He brazenly suggests that she leave Harold. But suddenly Harold's face changed terribly. Making a sharp lunge with his spear, Harold put the point directly to the neck of the impudent young man, which caused him to wheeze with fear and indignation, making a scary face. Harold informs the screaming scoundrel that it's not enough for him to put his eye on his woman and finish him off. The accomplices of the young man stand nearby in shock. Harold is gloomy. He understands that everything led to this, and there is nothing to be surprised about. The thugs quickly back down and say they were joking, and that Aitzi is standing behind him, and she is fine. Harold looks at 80 with excitement. Probably she was surprised and did not expect such a reaction. He mentally apologizes and hopes that everything will be all right. Removing the weapon from the throat of the insolent man, he informs Ati that in this case, he simply could not remain silent. He suggests that she go into the maze already. She agrees. The insolent men whom Harold rebuffed stare after him in amazement. One thinks it looks like it's over, but the other is not sure. They think Harold is still a beginner, but they really don't want to mess with him again, because he could have killed one of them just now. Meanwhile, Harold and Ati go to the maze. He smiles at her and says that everything will be fine, because he is here. He is next to her. When they enter the maze, they cry out in amazement. It's quite impressive there. Harold casually asks if this is really the maze. Harold is delighted with how the floor and walls shine. Ati reports that it is the light of the labyrinth. Then she remembered something and addresses him by name, wanting to say something. Ai is embarrassed and says that she was very happy at that moment. Harold looks at her in surprise and asks again. Ati blushes and mumbles something about being surprised that he called her his woman. But Harold can't make out her words. He's just glad she's not upset. Suddenly, in front of Harold's surprised eyes, Ati sat down in a comfortable position and fired a quick, accurate shot somewhere deep into the maze. Continuing to look deep into the corridor, she waits for a reaction. But it's quiet there. Then she tells Harold that she has injured someone there. He is very surprised. A little further down the corridor, they actually saw a defeated monster. She really got hit. And Harold says it's great because he didn't even notice it. Ati is pleased with the praise, but it was a small monster. And she has naturally sharp hearing and eyesight. Harold knew she was capable, but not that capable. He asks if they can go further into the maze. Ati replied to the surprised Harold that she had somehow reached the middle of the maze, but she would not have succeeded alone. Then the monster croaked. Harold understands what she means. He asks if she had any friends before. She is silent, and he anxiously calls her name again. After a short silence, Ati informs the surprised-looking Harold that she had friends when she lived on the western continent, crouching by the defeated monster. They talk. She informs Harold that there was a group of explorers on the western continent that consisted only of women. Ati reports that she was then part of this research team. But there was also something there that she doesn't want to say. Harold understandingly tells the confused Ati that he probably shouldn't have asked her and that if she doesn't want to, she cannot talk about it. Ati looks gratefully at Harold. She thinks he is kind. But she thinks now is the time to tell him everything. She decided to briefly tell him about it. Then they had a head who fell in love and gave that person most of their profits. They mined a lot, but it wasn't enough for him all the time. And one day, Adi was drugged with sleeping pills, and when she woke up, she was already handed over to a man who was engaged in illegal business. Harold is shocked to hear this. Ati tells the shocked Harold that she had previously heard that an innocent maiden from the Dark Elf family could be incredibly valuable. Harold says that he is very sorry that this happened to her. He believes that her leader acted just terribly. Ati fumbles with her fingers. She says uncertainly that if her boss had acted differently then something would not have happened. Ati means that otherwise she would not have met such a kind person as her master Harold Sama. Harold is shocked again. Harold is amazed. But Ati says that if she met another person instead of Harold, and he turned out to be terrible, then she would hate the past. Harold is impressed by her words, but can't believe she said it. And he painfully thinks that too little time has passed, and he does not remember being a good master. Then Harold decides that he needs to get better. He is going to try his best for this. and he will start by skinning the defeated monster. Looking at how Harold works, AT confusedly says that, besides, she now seems to understand the feelings of her former boss. Ati continues to say that if she falls in love with Harold-sama, she will also do anything for him. Harold and Ati continue their journey through the maze. Ati tirelessly shoots the monsters walking there. AT takes down the monsters, and Harold butchers them. The monster skins turned out to be heavy, and he thinks they need to hurry home. Then AT calls his name loudly. IT seriously informs Harold, who has come up, that there is a door in front of them and that there may be some treasures there. Harold is at a loss. Really treasures. Harold was going to say that they had had enough for today, but since that was the case, he agreed to see what was behind the door. But then they would immediately go back. AT agrees. AT makes some magical passes with his hands, and suddenly big butterflies began to fly around them. Harold looks at them in surprise. Not understanding what exactly is going on, he asks Ati what she is doing. She replies that she created these butterflies with the help of her magic. AT reports that she has made it so that the butterflies can smell those places where there is danger, and therefore they will stop where the traps are located. Harold cried out in delight. Looking at Harold, AT informs him that she has many other spells, but alas, she cannot use any of them directly in battle. Then she noticed one of the butterflies. Ati says there are more traps ahead, which means there could still be treasures left. Harold is not sure if she thinks that no one has been here before them. IT agrees, because many are on the upper levels. Besides, Ati says that this treasure may have appeared here recently. Harold is again surprised how it can happen that he has appeared recently. She says Harold got it right. It is believed that the labyrinth has its own will, and that when the treasure is taken away, the labyrinth liquidates this place several days. Over time, the maze places the treasure in other places, and it then sets traps. Then Harold thought about it. But there were rumors that the maze also generates monsters. It's full of mysteries. After bypassing the traps, Harold and AT open the door. He commands to go forward, and they enter a large, spacious room with a raised platform in the center. Harold looks at the object, which is located on a raised platform in the room. He realizes that it is definitely some very valuable artifact. Looking at the object in front of him, Harold assumes that it is a cursed dagger or something like that. AT agrees. This is a rare item for high levels. Harold tells Ati that she has already realized that he doesn't know much about the maze, so he wants to know what she thinks they should do with this dagger next. Ati replies that it depends on what kind of magic underlies the curse. You can use magic items, but if they are based only on harmful curses, then they will not be able to use it or sell it. Harold suggests that they leave everything as it is, until they figure out what kind of curses they are. He wants to avoid danger. He asked if this dagger is expensive, and Ati replies that it is. AT clarifies, saying that the amount of this dagger can buy an entire house. This shocked Harold. Does the dagger really stand like the house he's been saving up for 15 years? IT also informs that if they can consistently make a profit at the lower levels, they will have enough for a month. But if they are lucky, they will receive the right amount in one go. Harold listens in shock. Harold believes that since they can't afford a house right away by selling a dagger, then you shouldn't worry. It's better to earn safely. They only need money for travel. AT agrees with him, having come to such an agreement. Harold and his companion, the dark elf AT, smile at each other. Harold and Ati came out of the maze with the obtained monster skins, and there is some movement and chatter outside. Harold and AT stopped at the edge of the crowd. They don't understand what's going on ahead and why there's so much fuss. It turned out that the cause of the general commotion was the man in armor, the Count's third son, who was still accompanied by an elf. There are rumors that he is going to the labyrinth. Harold recognized both him and the elf. Harold, looking at the Earl's son and his escort, realizes that it really was her that time. The son of the Count is clearly behaving audaciously, loudly declaring that the elf is his servant. He brags about her in front of the crowd. The Count's son behaves rather rudely. He strongly pushes the elf and demands to publicly say who is her master. She is ashamed and angry. The Count's son pushes the elf hard again. It hurts her, but she says that her master is the Count's son. He laughs loudly, continuing to brag to the crowd. Harold is outraged by the behavior of the Earl's son. He believes that he does not dare to do this and that the elf needs to fight back. But he immediately realizes that they are connected by the same procedure as they are with Ahti, and this is impossible. The Earl's son continues to smugly boast that his elf is very beautiful and has magic skills. The cheeky son of the Count suddenly grabbed the elf strongly. He believes that she will not only be useful to him in the maze, but also entertain him in the evening. Intoxicated by the attention of the public, the Count's son declares that none of those present is worthy of the body of his maid, but he will allow them to listen to how she entertains him. Ahti, standing in the back rows, tells Harold that there are too many people here and she can't see anything that's going on there. Harold replies that she doesn't need to see all this and suggests that Ahti leave here. She doesn't understand why, but agrees with him. Harold is unhappy with what he saw. Harold and Ahti left the surroundings of the maze and the crowd and headed to the city to sell what they had obtained in the maze. Harold and Ahti arrived at the Naples Trading Company. Harold has dealt with them before, and he knows that they pay for everything they bring from the maze. He is greeted by an employee of the company. Harold greets him back. The employee's name is Tosu-san, and he politely asks Harold what exactly he can do for him. Tosu-san is very surprised that he sees Harold's skins from the maze. He did not expect Harold to decide to switch to exploring the maze and clarify why this happened. Harold reports that a lot has happened to him and that he needs money to get to the southern continent. Tosu-san thinks it's a good reason and that he won't ask unnecessary questions. Tosu-san estimated the skins brought by Harold at 1,500 each, for a total of 12,000. Harold is shocked by what he has heard in the high price. Harold is shocked to think that he was paid 7,000 a day, and here it is almost twice as much. He thinks that if it goes on like this, he will save money faster than he expected. Then he decides to ask Tosu-san something. Harold asks Tosu-san if he knows how much it will cost to get to the southern continent now. Tosu-san asked again and thought a little before answering. Sitting in the forest hut where they found temporary shelter, Harold and Ahti eat. Harold thinks that they need 3 million for two to get to the west and about 10 million if they go directly to the southern continent. The high cost is due to the fact that the direct road goes through the sea teeming with monsters. But it will be cheaper and safer to go through the west. And safety is the main thing. If they raise the money, then everything will be fine for them. Harold is excited. Their initial goal was to raise 5 million, and now he has a clear idea of what they will need. Their hunt in the maze began. Harold and Ahti successfully continue to hunt monsters in the maze and hand over the trophies they received to the floor shop in the city. Harold and his companion, a dark elf named Ahti, suddenly turned out to be a great team and work well together. They earned 170,000 in a week. If you deduct the expenses for the necessary, there are 120,000 left. Harold would like to go to the middle levels. Ahti thinks that everything will be fine and says that she will take care of everything. Would he stand that she will take care of everything? Harold says that this is encouraging for him, and that tomorrow he and Ahti will go to the middle levels of the maze. She agrees. But at that moment, he didn't even know what was there. Neither Harold nor Ahti had any idea the day before what they would encounter on the middle levels of the maze. And now the moment has come when Harold and his companion, the dark elf Ahti, went to the middle levels of the maze. Harold is a little worried. He thinks that they are finally going to the middle levels, but he wonders what they will face there. Suddenly, Ahti, who was walking a little ahead, tensed and stopped. Harold is surprised. He asks what happened there. After a short silence, Ahti anxiously informs Mr. Harold that she does not like something here. Harold clarifies what she means. The fact that there is an oppressive atmosphere and that we have lost our way. Ahti listened. No, that's not what she's talking about. Someone is approaching them. Suddenly, Ahti abruptly pinned Harold against the wall and screams that they need to hide now. At that moment, a monstrous roar was heard from the labyrinth, which shot Harold right down the corridor where they are hiding. A huge, toothy monster with eyes burning like flames is rushing. I flinched when she heard the monster approaching, and Harold, not hiding his fear, screams when he hears a huge monster roaring in the dark. At the same moment, a huge monster body rushed past the place where he and Ahti were hiding in the tunnel. Continuing to emit a terrifying scream that echoes far through the tunnels, the monster disappeared into one of the corridors. Ahti, who fell to the ground as the monster ran past, informs the shocked Harold that this monster came from the lower floors. Brushing off her clothes, she continues to say that this monster seems to be some kind of earth dragon. Harold immediately remembered the guard's words. Now Harold understood who the guardian was talking about when he told him that a monster from the lower levels had been spotted on the upper levels. AT says that her ordinary bullets won't even leave scratches on him. He has pretty thick skin. Harold suggests that Ati go home. He would love to go to the middle levels, but he doesn't really want to meet that creature. Ati agrees with him. Suddenly, Ati and Harold tensed up. They hear someone in the hallway screaming and calling for help. It's a man, and he's running towards them. And then a man rushed out of the corridor. He shouts loudly and asks them to wait for him. The man's face is distorted with horror. He screams that a high-level monster has appeared, and he asks someone to help him. The man fell to his knees. He says that there were 4 of them and that his companions hid in a crevice. But the monster found them. The man says that now this terrible monster near the crevasse is waiting for people to come out to devour them. Listening to the lamentations and pleas of the man who ran out, Harold thinks that he has already seen him somewhere before. And I finally remembered where. The man who was now desperately asking for help turned out to be the same arrogant bully who not so long ago bothered Harold and AT near the entrance to the maze. But it's too late to go back and call for help. The man continues to beg, and Harold thinks that there are hardly many people who can defeat that monster. He understands a person's feelings, but it's reckless. Harold, looking at him, thinks that asking for help from those with whom he recently got into a bad situation is not very good. Harold says out loud that he's sorry. Continuing to plead, the man informs that several of them have children, and that if they die in the maze, their children will be left alone. Harold froze. Harold instantly remembered his childhood and how he lived when he lost first his father and then his mother. The maze is directly related to the death of his parents. And for Harold, this connection means that the maze will again take away a parent from some child. Harold asks the man where his people are. He was surprised to clarify that he really would help him after all. Worried, AT also didn't quite understand what Mr. Harold meant. Harold smiled at AT and replied that the man claims that those people have children, and even though he really pisses him off, there's nothing to be done. We'll have to go help. Harold informs Adi that he wants to use his secret weapon, and that she will take care of him when he loses consciousness. Adi shouts in shock after the fleeing Harold. She does not understand what secret weapon she is talking about. Harold, with a spear at the ready, rushes quickly along the corridor of the maze, rushing to help people stuck in the crevasse. And then he ran out to the place where the monster was waiting for its prey. Harold thinks this is it. Those 4 are probably hiding in that crevice, and the Earth Dragon is clearly waiting for them to come out. Harold, standing behind the Earth Monster, who is patiently waiting for his prey, assesses the situation and prepares for an attack. Harold states that, well, since there is only one monster, he thinks he can pull off his idea quite easily. Harold stated that the monster has the carelessness and pride of a strong man. He is too busy playing his role to notice him behind him. So Harold has every chance of attacking. Harold's, grabbing a spear at the ready, jumped out of his hiding place and mentally screams that, well, the monster blew in this fight. Harold's body began to change rapidly. He was accumulating energy from another dimension, and every centimeter of his body was bursting with this powerful energy. And his brain froze, as if it was ready to explode. And now Harold seems to be able to expel this accumulated terrible energy into his short spear. He strikes a terrible blow at the monster. Harold suddenly remembered how many years ago his father had told him that this power was different from the power of magic, and that this ebullient flow of power was not allowed to be openly demonstrated in this world. The spear, thrown by Harold with monster speed and force, rushed towards its target, preparing to hit it with one precise blow. And, of course, Harold's spear pierced through the skin of the stricken monster, causing him to scream in frustration mixed with pain. The monster collapsed with a crash. After performing such a terrifying blow, Harold lost almost all his vitality. Blood flowed from his eyes and nose, and he staggered, lost consciousness, and fell to the ground. Already falling, Harold thought with the remnants of his consciousness that such a blow would cost him very dearly. Through the fog, he also heard AT's voice, shouting something as she ran to his aid. Opening his eyes a little, Harold automatically thought that his head was lying on something soft. Then he came to himself and realized everything. He was lying on AT's lap. Who was calling him and asking if he was awake? Looking at Harold, who had regained consciousness, AT began to cry. She says she wondered what was going on and almost immediately followed him into the tunnel. Harold smiled at her and said that he was fine now, and then he struggled up the tunnel floor. Harold reflects thoughtfully that his head is a little dizzy, but there is no feeling that more serious consequences are coming. AT says that for some reason he lost consciousness, but she ran after him and saw him. and she also saw blood. Harold smiled at Ati and said he would be more careful next time. She scowls and asks him to promise her that. Harold replies that he will. Then Harold remembered about those people in a crevasse and asked if they were all right, and almost immediately they saw those very people coming out of the tunnel. The whole company crowded around Harold and thanked him for saving them, and their leader apologized for what he had said to them then. One of them cries and thanks Harold for saving him. He already thought that he would never see his child again, and believed that he would soon die. Harold and his companion, a dark elf named Adi, looked at each other and smiled contentedly. They are glad that everyone is alive. Harold folded his hands busily. He had just won, and would like to take home a part of the monster carcass for sale. But it is obvious that it will be difficult to cut it, because the skin is too dense. AT reports that the monster's skin is dragon metal, and that its skin is really hard. It is difficult to remove, but Mr. Harold has already made a hole in it. And by the way, she wants to ask him something. Standing by the defeated dragon, Ati asks Mr. Harold how he was able to punch such a big hole in this monster. Answering Ati's question about how he punched a hole in the dragon, Harold said that he used the rare skill Flaming Continental All-Destroying Spear. After hearing Harold's answer about attacking the dragon, Ati is very amazed. She's surprised to say that the master has a very rare skill. Harold also informs her that every time he uses the spear, he loses consciousness and faints, and the spear also gets hot and begins to melt. Therefore, he cannot use it all the time. Adi remembered how he fell, and tears sprang from her eyes again. She, almost crying, begs Harold not to use the spear again. Harold is surprised and flattered by her words. He listens to her and then smiles sadly and replies that he will try not to use it again. Then a company of the rescued came up to them. They offer Harold help to bring the carcass of the defeated dragon to the house because he saved them all, and they want to repay him with help. Harold gladly accepts their offer because this monster has such thick skin, and he has no idea how much money they will be given for it. In the company in Naples, where Harold brought his loot, he communicates with employees. He is informed that the average purchase price for the material that he brought them is quite a lot. Harold is informed that the cost of his production is exactly 13 million. Hearing such a sum, Harold went into shock and almost fainted again. Worried, Ati asks the shocked Harold if he is all right because he somehow changed his face. Harold clutched his head. He just doesn't have the words. But now it became clear to him why so many people wanted to get into the maze to hunt. The employee asks Harold to enter his bank details into the form, since his payment is very large. Harold is worried, but fills out the form. He hasn't used a spear for a long time and got hurt, but it's a good compensation for his wound. 2 days later, Harold checked his bank account and found that his earned 13 million had actually been transferred to him. He still can't believe it, but he got the money, which means they can go on their journey to the southern continent. Harold returns to the hut and informs Ati that he is at home. He also brought a delicious dish with peaches and offers it to Ati. She clarifies if he definitely does not want it himself. Apparently, Ati really liked Harold's attention, and she looks at the yummy with indescribable delight. Harold says he decided to surprise her. That's why he brought her a treat. She thanks him and says she's eating it. Harold is happy to watch AT eat a delicious snack. She says that she really likes it. While she is eating, Harold informs her that they have finally saved up enough money and are going on a trip tomorrow. AT sees the carriage for the first time and asks Harold if it is. He confirmed it. The carriage will take them to the port city, and already there they will board a ship and cross the continent on it and arrive at the western one. They get into the carriage and drive away. From the carriage window, Harold suddenly saw the remains of a fire that had once been his home, which he had earned for many years. Remembering everything that happened to him, he thinks that before he could not have imagined that he would find himself in such a situation. Harold smiles contentedly. He looks at Ati and thinks that you never know what the world has in store for you. Ati noticed his look and asked if everything was okay. He was confused and, in order to change the subject, asked if she had been to the western continent before and how she liked it there. Ati thought about it. There's a wide variety of races, and therefore there are often conflicts. But even so, it is very attractive. Harold thinks Ati will have something to tell when they get there. She agrees, but immediately apologizes for some reason, and he says that she doesn't have to do it. AT emotionally informs that since Harold Sama needs her, she is already very happy about it. He smiles. A little ahead of their carriage, 2 people appeared. This is an old man and a girl. They are clearly waiting for the carriage. as it should take them to the port. The carriage stopped to pick up pedestrians and the old man got in first. He stared at Harold and Ati in surprise, and they stared back at him. The old man asked the young man who else he was. Harold was surprised and said that he seemed to have met a man somewhere before. Harold thought the man had made a mistake. The man started talking about someone young, whom he had already met. The man said that his expression was not so kind. He tries to remember his friend, but he remembers that he was very cool. But his son was no match for him. Then the man's granddaughter appears in the room and calls him a brute. The man apologizes and says that his memory has been failing him lately. The girl makes her child remember all the names. She asks for the father's name, and the man calls his son Gergo. Gerald thinks this name is familiar. After a while, the man laughs and says that they are going to the Western continent. The main character understands that they are on their way. They're on their way. Finally, they arrive at the port city. The man says goodbye to the guys. His granddaughter told the heroes that they were boarding a ship and advised him to choose. Then they say goodbye. The guys decide to look at the ship options for themselves. After a while, the man suggests that they choose the best option for themselves. The man offers several options and says they have a week to make a decision. Ati and Harold then decide to go in search of a hotel. Suddenly, the main character's bag is stolen. The young man is scared because all his savings were there. The main character grabs the thief and notices the bullet marks. Ati shot at the ground to slow down the thief. The young man examines the thief and realizes that he really needs money. Ati is trying to teach him proper manners. Suddenly, the thief's mom appears. She apologizes for her son. The main character advises the woman to properly educate her son, but she says she is trying, but she is not succeeding. Suddenly, the young man begins to scream and asks his mother to shut up, because if they have money, they will be able to help their father pay off the debt. The young man runs away. A woman runs after her son. Harold understands that this family has obvious problems. Ati says this happens in every city, but now they need to find a hotel. After a while, the heroes are told in all the hotels that there are no empty seats. The heroes have received more than 10 rejections, but suddenly they find an empty room. The room was quite cramped and had one bed, so the guys would have to sleep together. It sees 2 pillows and is very confused. Harold didn't know what to do because the room was very cramped. He decides to take a bath and think about everything. Ati also wanted to take a bath and said that the room was too small. Harold decides to smell her, but the girl is very embarrassed. Suddenly, Harold hears people passing by. The men talked about the strange rumors in the Empire and about their campaign. They thought the war would start soon. After the young man took a bath, he came into the room and lay down on the bed. He was thinking about how he would sleep with Ati together in the same bed. Ati then returns to the room and calls Mr. Harold. The young man grabs Ati's hand and smiles, and then says that he is still awake. Harold suggests that Ati discuss the issue with the ship. They have a whole week left, but if they delay, they will sell out all the tickets. The guys decided to go get tickets the next day. Ati goes to bed, but Harold thinks she is unwell. The young man decides to go to bed too and hug Ati, since he is her master. The guys fall asleep together. The next day, the guys buy 2 tickets to the ship. The man gives them tickets and informs them that the departure will be in 5 days at noon. Later, the guys come to the ship. The young man asks to look at the tickets of the guys and says that they are very lucky with the room, and it is surprising that it has not been occupied yet. The guys come into the room and are surprised by what they saw. Ati screams with delight. The girl runs up to the window and sees a lot of fish swimming in the water. She really likes it. The young man realizes that the room is located below the water level. He understands that Ati really likes this room. He decides to walk around the ship alone. Suddenly, Cecile, whom they had recently seen, calls out to him. The girl is glad that the guys chose this ship. Harold asks Cecile where her grandfather is. The girl says he's asleep. She suggests that the young man take a walk around the ship together. A little later, the girl enjoyed a delicious meal. She decided to propose to the young man, but he refused. Suddenly, Cecile says that her grandfather liked the young man very much. He only talks to people he likes. Suddenly, Cecile pulls out his sword and points it at the young man. Harold deflects her attack, which surprises the girl very much. Harold says it's dangerous to attack so suddenly. The girl replies that if he hadn't reacted in time, she would have been able to stop this attack. The main character and the girl are standing in the alley. They have pointed their weapons at each other and are waiting for each other to strike. Cecile grins and looks directly at Harold. She asks if the guy was ready to attack, because he fought her off and did not dodge as he should have. The young man chuckles. He answers with a mysterious, "Who knows?" but thinks to himself that what happened to him earlier was very dangerous. Holding the hilt of the weapon in one hand and the end of it in the other, Harold directs his gaze at the girl and thinks that she is very dexterous. Cecile holds his sword in one hand and lowers the weapon. The guy confusedly follows the girl's example and asks why she attacked him so suddenly. The girl asks why again and chuckles, amused by the main character's reaction to what happened. Cecile points her finger at the guy and smiles brightly with all her teeth. She explains that since her grandfather liked Harold, it means that he is strong. This answer surprises the young man. He opens his eyes and opens his mouth, looking at the girl in a puzzled way. The guy thinks that this reason for the attack is very strange. Meanwhile, the girl sheaths her sword and winks at the hero, saying that she just checked it and promises not to do it again. Not really trusting Cecile, the main character looks reproachfully, not believing her words, and asks if she promises exactly. The girl waves her hands and confirms the words of the young man, so that he does not worry. The girlfriend of the main character informs that it's time to return and points her finger in the other direction. The young man looks at her with displeasure, holding his spear in his hands, and asks if it would be better then to split up so that she goes first, since he still does not trust after what happened. Turning around to face the guy, the girl smiles brightly and apologizes, repeating again that it really won't be like this anymore. She doesn't have time to finish. At one point, the characters hear someone screaming for help. They turn in the direction of the sound and see the robbers, with a malicious grin, moving away from the scene. There is a boy on the shoulder of one of them, asking for help and hitting the man's back with his hands. Standing at the very edge of the bridge, Cecile and Harold watch in amazement as, unaware of any obstacles, the criminals quickly rush away, carrying a defenseless child with them as a hostage. The little boy screams, cries, and kicks in the hands of bad people, and then Harold remembers that he had seen the child before. A memory arises in his head of how he once took the same boy by the collar of his clothes, catching him doing something. Cecile immediately runs away. The girl turns in the opposite direction from the hero and quickly runs away to catch up with the kidnappers as soon as possible. Chuckling, Harold notes to himself that his friend acts without a drop of doubt. After a few seconds, the hero also hurriedly makes a run-up and quickly runs in the same direction as Cecile, catching up with her quite quickly. The girl turns around at the loud clatter of heels from running and asks in surprise if the main character decided to help her. The guy reaches the same speed as his friend without even being out of breath. He briefly replies that it is. The girl smiles, looking at the main character. She notes that his character matches his kind face. Besides, Harold is a pretty good warrior. In short, he can be called a good guy. Frowning, the guy pouts his lips in displeasure, while the girl laughs and continues to run. The young hero stops and points his finger to the side, looking with a surprised face and cursing. The heroes quickly reach the middle of the bridge. Their gazes, full of anxiety and determination, are riveted to the pier, from which, as if foreshadowing trouble, a boat with 2 kidnappers departs, in whose hands there is a defenseless child. Harold exclaims in despair that 2 men jumped into the boat. One of them was vigorously wielding oars, while the other, holding a child on his shoulder, seemed the epitome of menace. The main character and his girlfriend are rushing to the pier, but it's too late. The boat sailed quite a distance away from them. The guy says that he and Cecile almost caught up. At the same moment, the girl shouts to the hero to sit down. Cecile is approaching the shore, clutching 2 oars tightly in his hands. With a determined look, she turns to Harold, pointing to the boat and urging him to take a seat. The guy asks if the girl is sure that she can take the boat without permission, because she is a stranger. The hero hesitates, does not think that this is a good idea, but there is no other option. The girl screams that if the boat is damaged, she will pay for the damage herself. The young man nevertheless agrees and gets into the boat. Cutting through the waves of the sea, the vehicle continues to sail after the kidnappers. The guy holds out his hand and asks Cecile to stop rowing. The main character looks out from behind one of the stones to understand the situation around. Harold sees several ships moored to the dock. There is no one around, just mountains and a couple of drifting boats. The young man makes a verdict that those criminals are on this island. The girl suggests that, most likely, there is a shelter for those who kidnapped the child and, Given the number of ships and boats, they have many comrades left. After that, both heroes get out of the boat and step onto the shore of the island. The guy holds his weapon tightly in his hands, sneaks almost inaudibly, and looks around so that no one suddenly attacks, while Cecile kneads her fists and says loudly that she will break absolutely everything here, without fear that someone will hear her. Harold exclaims that he and his partner must proceed with caution. In response, Cecile puts her hands on her hips, saying that everything is fine, because she is strong, and the main character is also pretty good, therefore emphatically stating that they cannot just lose like that. The guy raises an eyebrow questioningly. He wonders where the girl gets so much confidence from, and he agrees that Cecile is much stronger than himself. At one point, the hero is distracted by some noise. The main character listens to the vast emptiness of the sea. His gaze wanders over the water surface, and suddenly he notices the vague silhouette of a boat in the distance. He stops and, concentrating, tries to examine its outlines, but believes that he just imagined it. Harold turns away from the endless waters and heads towards the forest, following his girlfriend. He holds the spear tightly in his hands, still thinking that he probably just witnessed a boat with fishermen. But still, a slight confusion hovered in his thoughts. The heroes pass on. Cecile resolutely steps forward, while her friend walks calmly behind, holding a weapon at the ready. The girl looks around and assumes that somewhere on the island is their lair. Looking out from behind one of the trees, the heroine looks around carefully and asks a rhetorical question whether someone can be here. After passing on, the girl gets out from behind the bushes, holding a couple of twigs in her hands, and asks again if there is anyone here. The girl's cheeks turn a little red. She waves her arms, asks the guy what he's doing. Harold replies that there is absolutely no point in wandering around. After that, the main character points his finger to the side. The characters see a picture that they pay attention to. The grass was trampled in places, as if someone had passed through it recently. Harold and his girlfriend's gaze lingers on the dried shoe marks left on the ground. The main character has an obvious conclusion that someone could have passed through here recently. In response to his conclusion, the girl, snorting with displeasure and looking away, throws with annoyance that she noticed this without any prompting from Harold. Smiling awkwardly, the guy apologizes and directs his gaze at the girl, hoping to dispel the tension between them. After a couple of seconds of silence filled with awkwardness, she suddenly says that it was not necessary to apologize. After a while, the characters come out to the house, which looks old and shabby, as if burdened with time, and as if hiding behind wide branches. It becomes clear to Harold that it looks like he and his girlfriend have finally arrived at the place they are looking for. The girl and the guy are standing looking at the closed door. The young man says that the trail they have been following all this time ends at the house. In other words, this is the hiding place of the kidnappers. The young man raises his head to the sky, feeling the raindrops, cold and persistent, falling on his hair, and at the same time listens to the noise reminiscent of an approaching downpour. Before he has time to realize how suddenly the downpour begins to intensify, the main character stands with his head slightly tilted, trying to realize that the weather is getting worse, and now it looks like he will have to change his plans because of the rain. The young man lowers his head, and, feeling the raindrops sharply increase in number, he suddenly realizes that a downpour has broken out. Genuine surprise appears in his eyes, and his face expresses confusion, as if he cannot immediately understand what happened. The torrential rain intensifies, and the heroes find themselves under a heavy downpour. They're standing next to each other. Cecile suddenly decides to rush towards the nearest building, which, as it turned out, is the lair of the kidnappers, hoping to take shelter from the rain. Her movements are fast and determined. She screams, not understanding where the downpour came from. The guy watches in amazement as the girl, without slowing down, quickly heads towards the building. His eyes are wide open, and he barely realizes that she has almost reached her goal. He screams, asking where she's going. Harold grabs Cecile by her blouse and pulls her back sharply, trying to stop her. He is clearly aware that it is dangerous to go there, and his voice sounds determined when he says that they cannot go to this building. The young man says that they need to find another, more hidden entrance, and not try to break through the main one. He quickly assesses the situation, realizing that if they enter through the main entrance, they may end up right in the hands of bandits who have probably already ambushed inside. The hero asks Cecile to stop resisting and still pulls her by the collar of her shirt. The girl continues to scream and protest, saying that she will just tear everyone to shreds, and if she stays outside, she will get soaked to the skin. The guy notices a slightly open window, from which bright light is pouring through the rain. A plan quickly forms in his head, and, turning to Cecile, he suggests entering the building through it. The heroes decide to hide in barrels that they saw near the window. A young man is sitting in one of them, saying that it is necessary to assess the situation now. The girl is silent for a while. Being in one of these barrels not far from the main character Cecile says that according to her, he and Harold are now engaged in some complete nonsense, and it would be easier to kill all the criminals than to wait for some moment. The girlfriend of the main character believes that it is unlikely that among those kidnappers that they saw, there is someone really strong. The guy objects. He says that it is impossible to exclude the possibility of this, but it is better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Harold looks at the wooden wall of the barrel and says that after all, his main goal with Cecile is salvation. If necessary, he will certainly fight. But for now he asks his girlfriend to do everything strictly according to his instructions, without taking liberties. Cecile exhales in displeasure and, restraining her irritation, replies that she understood him and adds that her friend is behaving just like an old grumpy grandfather. Harold just quietly asks her to shut up. It seems to him that he heard footsteps approaching from somewhere in the depths of the building. At this moment, a crowd of robbers enters the room. Their heavy footsteps and loud voices fill the room. They are arranged around a set of massive barrels randomly standing against the wall. There are heroes hiding inside two of them. One of the bandits, grinning maliciously, throws to his partner what they are going to do with the guy who dared to steal their goods. The man in the bandana looks at him with narrowed eyes and briefly replies that the thief should get what he deserves. The man decides that the best way to deal with the thief is to introduce him to the boss himself so that he can pass sentence in person. His gaze slides around the room and stops at the wooden barrels, as if something in their arrangement has attracted his attention. The guy with the hairstyle covering one eye grunts and responds with a short but expressive, "I see," fixing a tenacious gaze on his partner. He, anticipating the upcoming events, grins with an unkind smile, and concentration is red in his eyes. Meanwhile, the main character, hiding in a barrel, catches every word coming from outside. Through the noise of voices, he makes out how the man with the gang adds that the boss is not indifferent to every little thing and has long lost his humanity. The two kidnappers burst into loud, unrestrained laughter. The man in the bandana, grinning, says that he is looking forward to the moment when he hears the boy's snotty voice. The main character is trying to make sense of everything that is happening around. It seems that Mad is exactly the kidnapped child who dared to steal their goods from thugs. Perhaps the boss of the thugs is characterized by excessive cruelty and ruthlessness. At one point, Harold hears voices coming from outside. They sound agitated. The questions he hears make him prick up his ears. At this point, the guy starts to get nervous, trying to figure out what's going on. The man in the bandana rubs his beard thoughtfully and asks where the spear came from in the first place. At this moment, the hero realizes that his weapon has been sticking out of the hole made by the sharp tip all this time. Cecile is terrified, afraid that they will now be discovered. The young man widens his eyes in surprise and tightens his grip on the gun handle. He keeps asking what the spear is doing here and who it belongs to. One of the bandits reaches for the spear to extract it, but his partner instantly stops him with a gesture. The man, with a slight strain in his voice, informs them that they have no idea who owns this weapon, and adds that if they start messing with it, problems may arise. The man, who has already stretched out his hand to the spear, squints and with a wry grin glances at the boy who stopped him with his hair on one side and expresses his agreement. Harold, hiding in a barrel, catches every word of the conversation going on outside, and his face increasingly reflects his growing anxiety and fear. The bandits, as if by tacit agreement, one by one headed for the exit. One of them said it was time to go, and a moment later, the room with the barrels was empty, plunged into tense silence. One of the departing bandits muttered suspiciously that it was strange that the spear was sticking out of the barrel. At this time, Cecile, who was hiding inside one of the barrels, felt relieved and did not even know what to say in a current situation. Harold, who was also sitting in a cramped barrel, was also relieved when the footsteps of the bandits finally subsided. Feeling the tension recede a little, he advised Cecile in an undertone, ironically, not to say anything, adding that it would be nice to think about his feelings sometimes. After getting out of their hiding places, Harold and Cecile carefully got out of the barrels, trying not to make the slightest noise, and stealthily headed for the exit, trying to leave the room while it remained empty. Harold, carefully running his hand over the rough surface, as if looking for a foothold in it, thought about how big this building was. His thoughts kept returning to the main thing. Where should they look for the kidnapped child? Around a bend, Harold suddenly came across two bandits walking side by side. He froze in surprise and was seized with instant fear. The unexpected encounter made him really scared, and he held his breath, trying not to give himself away. Harold and Cecile wasted no time, quickly and quietly slipped into one of the random dark rooms, barely managing to escape. The room was gloomy and deserted, but it was perfect for hiding. The bandits, not noticing them, passed by. Harold suddenly heard the girl call out to him softly. He was surprised by her words that he did not immediately understand what was happening, and, slightly confused, began to turn around, not expecting that she would speak to him at such a tense moment. Cecile, pointing at the strange egg on display, looked at the main character. Surprised by the find, she asked what it was in front of them. The young man turns around more strongly, saying that the thing standing on the pillow looks like an egg. The girl touches the egg with the tip of her finger and then immediately begins to move from side to side. The heroine asks her friend if she thought the egg had moved or not. The guy replies that she wasn't dreaming at all. Suddenly, the egg begins to crack one after another. It crunches and breaks, while the main character and his girlfriend watch him with horror and fear, because they do not know what will hatch out of it. The eggshell splits into two parts. Something quickly jumps out of it, bounces off the walls, and abruptly hits Cecile, who stands and looks at her with a puzzled look. It seems that something has got inside the girl's clothes. She is trying to remove it and shake it out of her clothes, screaming for it to get away. The main character is in shock, and together with his girlfriend, does not know what to do. He stands rooted to the spot and panics, not taking his eyes off her. Other people's voices are heard behind the closed door. They ask where the sound is coming from, and perhaps, as they think, an intruder has made his way. Harold panics because of this. He realizes that because of Cecile's scream, he and his girlfriend will now be discovered. Cursing viciously, while the girl continues to scream and try to get rid of the strange feeling, the young man thinks where to hide, because now the robbers are about to break in. One of the guys opens the door, saying that some kind of sound was coming from this room. Two men look around the room. Nothing has happened in it. At least it seems so at first glance. The young man managed to hide in the closet and drag his girlfriend away with him. At one point, something crawls through Cecile's body and rustles under her t-shirt. Because of this, the girl involuntarily squeaks and thereby attracts the attention of the men in the room. The robber realizes that the egg, which has been lying on a soft cushion all this time, turns out to be broken. His partner asks if someone has hatched, and if what is happening could be someone else's tricks. To this, the man replies that such a thing is quite possible. The dialogue between the two men continues. They are interested in the question of where the hatched something could have gone. The amazing thing is that it hatched at all. A thug in a tank top asks his colleague what to do now. One of the men remembers that he was brought by their boss after all, and it's probably worth finding what hatched, otherwise you won't get it. At the same time, Harold shuts the girl's mouth. She mumbles. Her eyes widen in surprise because the feeling of someone crawling over her still does not go away. In a whisper, the main character asks Cecile not to scream, otherwise both of them may be noticed. The answer is a quiet mooing. Taking her hand away from her mouth, the girl whispers that the snake is crawling all over her body and asks Harold to let her go because she can't take it anymore. There is panic in the eyes of the main character, and it slips through his mind that he has no other choice. At this moment, the guy presses his palm even harder into the mouth of the young maiden, until she begins to mumble only louder from discontent. And after that, he reaches under her t-shirt with his free hand to find a snake that does not allow the girl to relax at least a little and calm down. Harold, realizing that he was in a critical situation, began to act steadfastly. He put one hand under the girl's t-shirt to still grab the snake, while the other closed his mouth, so that Cecile would not scream because of such a sharp action by the guy. The young man asks not to twitch and be quieter, because the girl began to mumble and try to remove his hand from under her clothes. Turning to him, vaguely asking what he was doing, the guy replied that they had no choice. Cecile feels that the snake is even lower than it was a minute ago. The snake, which was previously under the outerwear, crawls into the shorts, and then the girl becomes extremely uncomfortable. Harold clearly wasn't expecting such a bad moment. He clutched his girlfriend with his hands even tighter. He noticeably comes into a state of anxiety and nervousness, realizing that the snake has escaped to a place where his palm should not go down. Cecile's face turns more purple. Fortunately, the young man manages to find the tail of the snake in time before it disappears completely into someone else's shorts, and with a sharp movement, pulls it out from under his clothes. A young man shows a trapped reptilian creature to a friend, saying that he was able to catch it. The girl covers her eyes and lies down on the chest of the guy, who's in surprise. Feeling confused, Cecile doesn't say anything for a while and looks away, thanking Harold for his help and apologizing for his screams. The hero pays attention to the top of his girlfriend's head and whispers that everything is fine, and despite the grunts and screams, their location was still not known by the thugs in that room. Meanwhile, the two guys continue to look around the room where they found the already cracked egg. One of the robbers moves the furniture that was previously in its place and tries to look through the cracks, while the other bends down, lies down on the floor, saying that he cannot find it in any way. Having come to the conclusion that the boss has most likely forgotten about the egg a long time ago, the man with blonde hair suggests an idea. Get rid of the one who hatched from it, if this something incomprehensible is found at all. As soon as the footsteps were heard retreating from the room, Cecile and Harold get out of their hiding place, the closet. The young man looks around and concludes that it looks like those two robbers have already left. Harold's girlfriend is interested in how long he will keep her. The young man opens his mouth slightly due to surprise and abruptly remembers that he still continues to hold the girl by her shoulder. The guy asks to accept his apology, waving his arms. Averting her gaze to the side, Cecile quietly, as if to herself, says that he might not have to apologize to her. The young man continues to try to justify himself, saying that he acted rather rudely with her and feels guilty because of this. But the girl exhales heavily and steps aside, almost inaudibly, half whispering that she is not angry at all. Deciding to change the subject of the conversation, the young guy is distracted by fumbling in his pocket and takes out a snake caught earlier, recently hatched. The hero asks with a reasonable tone what to do with her. The little snake does not feel threatened, but understands that there is no threat at all. He does not try to escape or escape, on the contrary. He looks with strong interest at a large human object with his eyes. After all, for her, Harold is someone she hasn't seen before. The guy starts to reason out loud, saying that those thugs who were in the room earlier will get rid of the animal if they can find it. The snake catches the essence of the young man's words and purrs sadly. Harold looks directly at the reptile, which obediently settled on his palm with its tail slightly curled, and while she is waiting for some additional words to find out something, the main character is found by Duma. The snake is far from easy. Whatever it was, the young man decided to once again ask the little snake, which is still in his hand, if she understands his speech, and in response, this animal, which hatched from an egg not so long ago, nods positively to the question posed to her by the guy, who nevertheless waited for her answer. Harold began to have thoughts about the snake creature. He was able to identify a couple of thoughts that could be clearly put together, said in his mind that the snake was really smart and could understand him without any difficulties, catch the meaning. At the same moment, the main character invites the baby snake to go with them, to which he exclaimed joyfully, accompanied by a short rumble, ready for joint adventures. But Cecile was able to scare this idea and did not like it at all. She rolled her eyes and stood in a wary pose. Here Harold is already asking the girl if they will take a tiny snake with them. Draws conclusions from what he has observed recently, says that she even understands them, thinks that it will not be worse. But a friend protests, saying that she is against this idea. In the near future, turning away from Cecile, he returned his attention to the animal and said that he even liked her in some way, to which the snake joyfully and melodiously gave voice. And Virgo's expression changed to a misunderstanding. Approaching one of the walls, the hero stopped around the corner, and the two of them watched other people who passed by them. They were very focused and attentive, presenting himself in front of an impressive door above which there was a stucco molding. The young man said that this was the last floor, and this was the only place where they had not been before. Staring at the door, The heroes heard a stranger who demanded to be entertained. This voice, as it could be understood, was speaking to a young guy, as he was called a cute boy. After that, the words changed to sounds very similar to the sounds of enjoying something. The young man mentally assumed, having a somewhat exclaiming tone, that it was Mad's voice, immediately thought about the situation in his head, and realized for himself that he wanted to save the other guy quietly, but apparently it would not work. Cecile decided to ask her friend what they would do in such a situation. The maiden's face was worried. Harold answers this question to the girl, no matter how much he would like to. But the boy will have to be taken by force. A friend has a good idea and offers it. It is necessary to assign the two of them to roles. The main character will have to pick up the young man and take him to a safe place. But the guy explains how dangerous this idea is, says, there is a high probability that other thugs will run to the noise. He tells his girlfriend that it will be difficult to fight and protect the boy at the same time. After that, the main character dictates his plan of action to her. Cecile begins to resent what her friend is talking about now, if they can easily put everyone together. Restlessly, she continues to express her point of view, continues that if she really becomes a bait, then she is the right person for this role, the girl claims. Harold looks at her with his kind eyes at his friend, filled, most likely, with faith in his plan. He continues to explain. Because she is strong, he asks her, and fighting and protecting someone at the same time is too difficult for him. Cecile looks at him in response. The guy ends his speech with a simple, please, to which the lady turns away and is silent for a while, probably thinking about whether to agree to this scam, which a friend suggested to her. Giving up, the girl shrugs and says that she understood the guy. Her task will just be to take the boy and run. The young man thanks for understanding, and now that they have a plan of action, it remains only to begin. The characters go behind a closed door, opening it, and see the picture that gives them goosebumps. They scream and freeze in place, not believing what is happening. In front of them is a monster with pointed paws and a girl's body. She sits on top of the kidnapped boy and laughs while Mad screams in fear and tries to get out. He clenches his fists and calls for help. The monster, with his insane, inhuman color, eyes, without taking his eyes off, looks at the unfortunate boy, says that everything is not enough for him and requires more. At the same moment, the kidnapped man screams, closes his eyes, and tries to leave, begging the nightmarish monster to stop the horror that is happening. The main character opens his eyes and realizes that Mud is being played as if he were some kind of prey. He is confused and does not quite understand what to do now. The plan was to get the boy out of the room quickly, but now everything is changing. Harold remembers the words of those two kidnappers that it's hard to call the boss a human being, and now he understands what it was about. The guy clutches a spear in his hand and argues that their boss actually turned out to be half human, half monster. The guy turns his gaze to his girlfriend, and at that moment, as if by tacit agreement, it becomes obvious to her that he wants to convey to her without even saying a word. The heroes walk deep into the room and freeze, looking at the monster with 4 eyes. The boss looks up and chuckles, asking who came to her. The terrifying monster drew attention to 2 people. His face depicted madness. A wide smile and wide-open eyes testified to this. He asks Cecile and her friend where they came from, calling them children. The main character chuckles and informs that this time he, along with his girlfriend, came for the boy. The monster breaks into a smile, saying that Harold is asking for the impossible. The monster turns his gaze to the kidnapped boy and begins to say that this very child stole something very important from the robbers, so he must make amends for her mental pain. In his clawed paws, the boss clutches a small jar, saying that it is very expensive, and its contents can cure any disease. One such bottle can cost 50 million rob. But besides, the monster stole it from the merchant ship herself. For a while, the main character stands in silence, looking at the kid, then at the boss of the robbers. An image pops up in his head of how the boy screamed how much he needed money, because then he would be able to save his father. The main character comes to the conclusion that the kidnappers are pirates, and moreover, their boss is a half-man, and he looks pretty terrifying. The monster turns out to be furious. Her face immediately darkens, her clawed paws are exposed to attack. The boss says that now he will not allow such rudeness towards himself, and now the heroes cannot count on mercy. The girl strikes the first blow on the monster's arm. The sword cuts through the air and collides with the hand of this something, but nothing happened. Her tails get a little disordered because of the fast speed with which she moved while hitting the scariest creature. Cecile runs away after the blow, saying that the monster has a hard shell that cannot be pierced. This angers the monster even more. Her eyes are white with anger, and there is a scream all over the room. Another blow, but from Harold's side. The face of the monster was evil and alarming. Teeth are tightly clenched. Eyebrows are mobile and most often raised. One eye is squinted, the other is fully open. Opening its mouth, the monster screams. Has it really started attacking him now? The hero, clenching his teeth and lowering his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose, tightens his grip on the weapon in his hand. Suddenly, he has a strange feeling, as if he is hitting not something soft, but metal. This powerful blow knocked down the monster. He did not realize until this moment that the young man would really be able to push the monster with one action. Due to the surprise effect, a questioning sound came out. A large body crashed into the wall that had previously been behind the nightmarish object. A dent of far from small size forms on the wall. Rolling down the wall, or what was left of the flat surface, the monster seemed to relax its body. Its paws were in a calm position. One could watch the surprised face of this half-man. Harold, looking at the terrifying creature, thought that it looked like he hadn't done any damage. But at the moment, it didn't matter to him. He still has the weapon in his hands that he used to attack something that used to keep up with the little boy. At this moment, the hero calls Cecile to help. Wasting no time, the girl reacted quickly, took off and grabbed the boy by the waist with one hand. Noticing the bottle lying on the floor, which the monster was talking about, Cecile grabs it on the run and drags the child away with her, saying that she will take this with her. Releasing its clawed paws, the monster screams that it will finish off and gut the girl and the main character, because her fresh, young prey was stolen, as well as her panacea. Angrily, the monster calls his subordinates, asking where they go at all. A whole group of robbers breaks into the room. They report that they have arrived at the place and are here. In a commanding tone, mixed with anger, he orders to catch the escaped girl, no matter what the circumstances, doing as they wish, but to bring Harold's girlfriend. The main character stays in the room and thinks that the three people who ran away will not be able to defeat Cecile in such a small number. In a dark room led by a monster boss on spider legs, there is a whole crowd of subordinate robbers. They are all clearly not in a good mood, and Harold stands alone against all of them. The monster gives a clear order to finish off the guy, and immediately all the bandits rush and attack the young man. He tightens his grip on his weapon and thinks about what to do now. Three robbers attack the boy. One is clutching a saber in his hand. The other two are about to attack with bare fists. The man swings and backhands the main character, but he manages to jump back and dodge the blow with a frightened cry. Without wasting a second, Harold kicks the robber in the stomach with all his might while the rest of the room is watching. The man flies off into the arms of his partners and squints from an unpleasant pain in the abdominal area. The main character continues to deal with criminals. One by one, he hits them with his spear and they fly away to the size of the others. Seeing all this action, the monster groans, considering Harold to be a stubborn boy. Time passes quickly, a whole hour or a little less. The robbers squeeze the guns in their hands and attack one by one, shouting that the main character should have already left, but he only asks them with a straight face not to say such terrible words. Nervously biting the claw in his hand, the monster looks at him with a displeased look and shouts for everyone to go away. The main character turns to the voice, and the robbers who continue to fight with him. With a loud cry, the monster releases a huge white viscous stream of incomprehensible liquid, more like a spider web, from an open place in its body. By mistake, she hits one of those who fought with the guy. Realizing that the next blow from the boss could fly into him, the young man looks in panic at the monster, then at the bandit, and thinks what to do now. A clawed paw reaches out to the guy, who manages to jump back and soar into the air, avoiding a blow and a battle with the robber boss. Right now, the young man is not in a position to attack back. The clawed hand misses, and instead of the guy hits the roof of the building because of something collapses. The fragments fall on the young man. He closes himself off from them and remains sitting on the destroyed floor. Picking up his weapon, the hero breathes heavily and directs his gaze directly at the monster. There is determination in his gaze. The boss mocks the guy and asks where his fuse is gone, because he doesn't look very good right now. Chuckling, the main character, despite his fatigue, manages to quip and thank the boss for holding back. Of course, there was no sincerity in this. Breathing heavily, Harold directs his gaze at the enemy, clutching a weapon in his hands. He thinks that he could easily deal with her with the power of the spear, but after that, he will simply fall down, and even if he defeats the monster, her minions will remain. A shrill scream breaks out of the young man's thoughts. He turns to look at him and opens his eyes wide in horror, watching what is happening. The robber who got the liquid screams in pain, because it corrodes his skin and face. It just drips off him. Perhaps the liquid was toxic and poisonous, and this makes the young man even more afraid of the consequences. Taking advantage of the moment, the boss again releases copious amounts of liquid to hit the main character, but he manages to dodge at the last moment, and she does not touch him. A mysterious silhouette silently watches everything that is happening from a high mountain, hiding in the shadows as if the very air around him has become opaque. Its outlines are blurred and indistinct. The young man was almost exhausted. His body is trembling slightly. His hands are no longer holding the weapon so tightly. And realizing this, the spider boss grins, because the hero does not have much left. The guy thinks he's bought enough time. He doesn't have the strength anymore, and he's not in a position to fight right now. He already understands what he wants to do. Despite the robbers surrounding him, the main character turns around with a sharp movement and quickly runs to the open door, to the exit, but suddenly slips on parts of the spilled liquid and realizes with horror that he is going to fall. Harold hits his face on the cold ground and leans on his hands to stand up. He growls, clenches his teeth, realizing that he needs to run. But he won't make it in time. The monster understands that this is his chance. He grins his teeth and reaches out with his paw to the young man, shouting that he finally got caught. At the same time, a strange silhouette on the mountain, which was actually Ati, pulls out his sniper rifle and aims at the monster, covering one eye. A magical stream gathers around the girl. Taking aim, she pulls the trigger and moves slightly to the side due to the recoil. The bullet tears through the air, swiftly flies straight at the target. The boss is already celebrating his victory, preparing to deliver the last blow, when suddenly he feels a bullet piercing her body. With a cry, the monster spreads its arms to the sides and screams, distracting itself from its prey. After the silver bullet hit the monster, smoke began to rise from the monster in all directions, rising skyward. The terrifying creature was stunned. Its mouth remained open, and its eyes were black as coal. At the same time, this shell of a disgusting entity began to fall apart in pieces, forming a pile of its body parts. The trunk broke in half, the large belly turned into incomprehensible remains from behind. There was nothing left of his arms but his shoulders. The monster's servants opened their mouths because of such a surprisingly quick victory over their boss. Not knowing how this could happen to their boss, the men begin to assume that the boss could have been struck by lightning. They are upset about this because victory was just around the corner. Fearing that no one else would be able to save them, the robbers felt that now they could not win at all, and decided to cowardly escape. Harold, on the other hand, silently watched this picture from the side due to shock. Getting up from the floor and turning in the other direction, the young man saw his maid, A.T., which amazed him. A friend stood with an unusual gun in her hands and looked straight at him. Her gaze was filled with determination. The moment the guy went outside, the long-haired girl ran to hug her master. His eyes were as wide as possible, as if he was numb. Immediately, the girl shares that she could not come to the rescue in time, and therefore used a bullet to direct lightning at the villain. As she said, Ati did it with great care so as not to offend Harold. The image of that monster pops up in my head, and I wonder if I sent lightning. What kind of incredible power his maid has. His face expressed sincere surprise at what he had heard. He is amazed that she has found him at all. Then the girl admits, with a little embarrassment on her face, that she has attached a beacon to her master, and wherever he is, she will always be able to find him. A.T. explains that this is the name of a special search magic. Harold thinks that he didn't even know about the existence of something like this, and it sounds quite convenient and interesting. The maid continues to explain that this magic is not omnipotent at all, because the effect lasts only a week, so it needs to be updated from time to time. Nevertheless, she is glad that Harold is okay. The young man realizes that he could have died without this beacon. Suddenly, the guy pulls the maid to him and hugs her for a short time. Pulling back a little, Harold apologizes for making her worry. AD is not angry, but asks to be let know if the main character is in danger again. Cecile and the rescued boy have been sitting under a tree for some time, hiding from the rain. They are located on the pier by the boats. The girl is waiting for the main character, and when he appears on the horizon, she exclaims. Of course, the girl starts to get indignant, saying that the guy is late. But as soon as she notices Ati next to him, she stops. She has another question. How did the maid get here in the first place? But the hero prefers to discuss this not now, but another time. The girlfriend of the main character agrees with this, saying that there are more important things to do now. For example, the fact that in such a downpour it will not be possible to swim because visibility is limited and there is a chance that everyone gathered here will simply get lost. The young man is thinking about what is best to do, because they can't just stand here and wait until morning. As it turned out, the clouds are already dissipating in the sky, and this cannot but please all the heroes. AT suggests sailing right now, before the bad weather starts again. The main character and AT are in one boat, while the kidnapped boy and Cecile are in the other. At some point, the boy's girlfriend asks him to stop, because something is wrong with the boy. Harold looks at the other boat, wondering what happened. The girl looks very worried, and shouts that the boy is very cold, even colder than when she carried him out of the den of robbers. If you look closely, you can see that Mud's body is covered with spots. It is possible that he was poisoned. An image pops up in the head of the main character of how he caught the boy with the monster and how one of the robbers died after the liquid was splashed on him as his skin peeled off. There is no doubt it really was poison. Cecile started screaming and begging to hold on to him, asking if the child could hear her. He looks scared because of such circumstances. At the same time, Harold looks at the bottle that they took with them, which was in the young man's hand. It dawned on the guy. He plunged into a recent memory, where the monster said about this bottle that it was very expensive and was a cure for all existing diseases in the world. Watching the boy, he reflected, if this substance is able to cure any disease, then perhaps the poison is not a hindrance for her, and will easily cope with the healing of the boy. The hero assumes that it was this bottle that Mad was hunting for, but now he needs it to save his life, not to die from the poison of a nightmarish creature. Cecile decides to give this antidote to the boy, demanding that he drink it. There were tears in her eyes. Matt himself is unable to drink, so the girl pours this liquid into someone else's mouth on her own. She's nervous, afraid it won't work, and literally begs for it to help. The kid reacts instantly, raises his head, and begins to cough so hard that part of the substance flies out of his mouth. A moment later, he lies down again. There were some remnants of the drunk solution around his mouth. Squeezing the jar harder, the heroine is stunned, cannot understand how it is, why he did not feel better. She had high hopes for this substance, but did they really not come true? Junu's eyelids, which had been slightly ajar before, are now completely closed. Cecile and Harold were enveloped in shock and fear, because this serum did not give the proper effect, did not help in saving the boy. Tears fall from the girl's eyelashes. She covers her eyes and sobs. Not believing what is happening, the young man looks at the boy, then at his girlfriend, and quietly asks if he is dead. The first thing Adi, Cecil, and Harold did when they reached the port and returned the boat was to bury Mud. A small grave was erected for him. The heroes looked at her with regret and sorrow. The young man was familiar with the boy's mother. He is sure that she is looking for him, and as she found him, she would hug him tightly, so he presents this picture. But it is never destined to come true. It is for this reason that the main character will never be able to hand over the corpse of his mother and tell about what happened. I don't even have the strength to look into other people's eyes. Harold decides to leave the boy missing, and all those who know the truth will pretend that they do not know anything. It is for this reason that the main character will never be able to hand over the corpse of his mother and tell about what happened. I don't even have the strength to look into other people's eyes. Harold decides to leave the boy missing, and all those who know the truth will pretend that they do not know anything. Cecile, standing near the grave and twirling a small flower in her hands, said she was still trying to save the child, because an attempt is better than inaction, and does not regret what happened, because she did what she had to do. After that, she left the flower at the burial site. The heroine walked ahead of the others, after a short silence, but was able to gather her courage and put her mind in order. Perhaps Cecile's determination is her innate talent, or acquired from daily training with her sword. Weapons certainly have a close connection with human life. Those who are able to wield them perfectly understand the value of human existence in this world. The same can be said about Atai, who before becoming a slave was on the verge of life and death, surviving in a maze. She and Cecile have probably already come to terms, and only the main character, who until recently lived a very ordinary life, realizes that he is unable to find his peace of mind. Peace in your soul. The young man's gaze falls to the ground. He's thinking about something of his own, while AT looks at him sadly. Walking through the city, the maid of the main character says that in the end, they could not do anything. But do not worry so much. The past should be left in the past. The girl in the hat continues. And for her personally, it is more important that Harold and Cecile are okay. The guys heard someone shouting at them from behind the stop. This attracted their attention, and they turned to the call. The characters notice Mada's mother. She looked very worried. The woman looks at the main character for a while, and he realizes that now he will have to lie, looking at his mother's face. The woman runs up to the young man and grabs his clothes. There were accumulated tears on the mother's face, shouting that her son was missing and asking, straining her vocal cords, if they had seen him. Immediately, the woman tells the morning news. Her husband and part-time father of her child died, and this news cuts like a knife both the woman herself and the main character. According to her, the man wanted to see his son Mada before he died. The boy's mother is choking with tears, and Harold can't even get a word out of himself, watching the hysteria in silence. The woman falls on her knees in front of the young man out of impotence, saying that the man wanted so much to stroke Mada's head, pat his hair. He thinks about how the little guy wanted to save his father, but in the end, Mad himself lost his life, and his father, without waiting for help, died. Harold sees his guilt in this, believing that if he had acted more quickly and confidently, he would have been able to help both Mud and his father. The main character's maid is also silent and does not say anything. The young man turns his gaze to her, thinking that Mada was poisoned, and his father simply did not have time, and, most likely, regardless of his actions, everything would have ended just as tragically. The woman rises from her knees and apologizes for losing her temper. She quietly says that she will continue to look for Mada. She must find her, because she has no one else but her son. Mama Mada runs back to her house, holding on with the last of her strength so as not to cry again, and Harold feels incredibly sad, realizing that this poor woman now does not even have a son, and he will not be able to say this directly, and no one could. Several days pass like this. The young man sits on the bed and thinks about the events that have happened during this time. There was nothing particularly significant. The guy showed Ati a snake. She looked at it in surprise, and so they were able to come up with a name together. According to the guy himself, only this moment is worth mentioning. Getting out of bed, the young man looks out the window, thinking, is this really how the last night on the northeastern continent will pass? The young man looks at his own reflection in the dark, thinking that he has begun to come to terms with what happened to him over time. Remembering the small grave that he and his friends built from mud, Harold thinks that this is just one of the unfortunate stories that has nothing to do with him, and usually this happens quite often. Another unpleasant thought arises in the hero's head. Since the death of other people is not uncommon, does this mean that sooner or later he will end up in the same way? The young man imagines all possible events of how his death could have happened. For example, when his house burned down. What if he had been asleep and burned with him then? Or during a boss fight? Maybe AT wouldn't have made it in time at the last second. Seeing the main character standing and thinking about something, the maid opens the door slightly and goes deeper into the room. The girl walks into the room and calls Harold by name. She anxiously asks what happened. A guy turns around at someone else's voice. His face expresses fear caused by his own thoughts. Touching his own head, the young man says that nothing like that happened. He doesn't want to share his thoughts and stuff someone else's head with it. Still with the same concern, the maid says that he looks completely unhealthy and sees how bad the main character is. He doesn't say anything and just squeezes his mouth into a thin strip. The guy repeats that nothing happened, but does not have time to finish, when suddenly his eyes widen in surprise. The girl pulls the main character by the head and sharply digs her lips into someone else's. Harold stands there, taken aback for a few seconds, and does not respond to the kiss. Nevertheless, breaking the kiss and stretching a thread of saliva between the tongues. The guy asks what Edie is doing, looks at her with surprised eyes while she holds the guy by the neck. The maid replies that if something is gnawing at a man very much, then at this moment it is better for him to just love a woman, and then it will get better. She had heard that this was the surest way. Throwing off her clothes, the girl, although embarrassed, tells the guy that everything is now at his disposal, and he can do with her what he wants. The young man freezes for some time, as if rooted to the spot, but then swallows the viscous saliva and says that, most likely, the maid is right. Abruptly, the main character knocks the unsuspecting girl onto the bed, saying that he will not stop even if she asks him to stop, because she herself said that Harold can do whatever he wants with her. Itai exhales raggedly, saying that she is ready for everything. The young man looks at her eyes, then at her lips, and leans closer. Harold pulls the girl into a long and wet kiss, not letting her pull away. A.T. mumbles into the mouth of the main character, but does not try to crawl away. She likes what's happening now. The guy breaks the kiss and immediately grabs the curvy forms of the elf with his palm, squeezing them tightly. He plays with his fingers, moving from side to side, while the girl puts her palm to her mouth, muffling the sounds. Continuing to play with the beads, the young man licks them and pushes them into his mouth, pinning the girl to the bed. She screams, but no longer from pain, but from the pleasure she has experienced. Pulling away, the hero hovers over A.T. and asks her to relax, being ready to take further actions. The girl closes her eyes, saying that she will try. With one sharp movement, the guy fills his insides, causing the elf to scream. The young man immediately sets a frenzied pace, from which moans, screams, and slaps echo throughout the room. The girl grabs the soft sheets with her palm, while the hero asks her forgiveness for his intemperance. The main character grabs the elf by the hands and pulls her towards him so that she comes into contact with him even more and closer. Adie is crying, hot moisture dripping from her eyes and saliva from her mouth. She is choking on her own tears and pleasure. When it's all over, Harold begins to blame himself for what happened. The elf sleeps next to her, tired after a hard night, and the young man argues that he can justify himself by saying that A.T. offered herself. But it's worth looking at the facts in the face, and everything turns out to be completely wrong. The young man acted like a real monster, used her phrase as a shield, and pounced like a wild beast on a defenseless little victim. The girl was really worried about the main character and, perhaps, did not even expect that he would do this to her. However, she had no choice. The elf is still wearing the slave's collar. If he sees her actions as resisting the master's orders, then she will simply die. The young man looks at the sleeping girl, thinking that he really wanted A.T., and not only the matter of carnal pleasures. Exhaling loudly, the guy decides that he should cool his head a little while the elf is resting. The ship, like a huge bird, cut through the restless waves that thundered against its sides. The sky above him, covered with thick, gray clouds, seemed as harsh and unforgiving as the sea. Inside, a guy was sitting on a wooden bench on the deck. His face was haggard, his eyes were tired, and he was nervously fiddling with his temples. The guy's sigh broke the silence, thick and lingering. I remembered my nighttime pastime, although I went out to wander around the ship and cool my head. But it didn't help. Obscene things come to mind anyway. Then someone calls out to him and calls him a boy. He is definitely glad to see the main character. The young man greets the man and falls into his thoughts. This is Cecilia's grandfather, and I think his name is Valen. An elderly man sits down next to Harold, but he does not understand why he sat down with him. Noticing a strange look, the grandfather of a friend asked not to look like that, explaining his behavior by a desire to talk. There was silence in the cabin, but Valen unceremoniously broke it with his words of gratitude to the boy. The young man does not understand what he is being thanked for, and therefore asks again. The old man explains that this is a thank you for taking care of Cecile. The young man does not answer anything, just looks at the guest in the cabin. A memory comes to mind when the girl grabbed the child and rushed out of the building with Mad. The hero did not think that Cecile would share his adventures with his grandfather, but Harold said that he should not thank him because he did not do anything special, and still he expresses his gratitude to the guy because Cecile is his granddaughter. The main character continues to insist on his own, saying that his girlfriend is even stronger than him and would be able to cope with everything on her own. But Valen makes a speech saying, it doesn't matter if you are strong or weak, winner or loser. It's completely different. Now it's another question. Whether a person survived or fell. When life hangs in the balance, it all loses its meaning. The old man continues to say that the girl always rushes headlong, to which the hero agrees with him not out loud. According to her grandfather, she lacks extra caution. Even that alone is enough to say goodbye to her life. Cecile told her grandfather how much she was dissatisfied with the decisions of the main character. But, winking, the man says that he immediately realized that attempts to restrain the girl were hiding here. The young man looks with interest at the man sitting next to him, still silently and heeding other people's words. The old man asks unexpectedly, noticing that this is just his guess. With a chuckle, Valen wants to know if it was possible that Cecile unexpectedly attacked the main character. He hesitates, and that's enough to understand the answer. The man becomes uncomfortable, and he apologizes for this incident. The young man replies that he is not particularly worried about this, and the man is pleased to hear this. The old man adds that he will not be able to repay the hero's kindness, but he is ready to listen. Harold doesn't understand what those words were about. The man notes that when he called out to the guy, it seemed that something was gnawing at him. The main character looks away and quietly says that now he would like to cool his head. The old man knew that in this case he could help the young blood to distract itself. He goes on deck with Gur. Surrounded by a crowd, Valen and Harold are going to fight. The guy has a spear in his hands. Valen has a sword. The assembled sailors ask if a fight is really planned. Some of them notice that they are holding a wooden sword and spear. The girls on the deck are looking scared, and the boys are hungry for a spectacle. The young man himself does not understand how the conversation in the cabin turned into this, but still gets into a fighting stance. The old man chuckles, saying that if a guy wants to drive his thoughts away, then a fight is the best option. Harold is pale, and the blood needs to be dispersed. The thought arises in the guy's head that now he understands who Cecile is. She has the same fuse as the girl, and it seems to the main character that now he is not fighting with the old man at all, but with his younger copy. Smiling, Balin says that he cannot restrain his strength and attack, that there are powers. The guy thinks that he is very uncomfortable, exactly until he feels a strange, oppressive atmosphere in the air. Dark whirlwinds form around the old man and the main character. Valen is still adamant. He points a gun at the guy, and Harold, on the contrary, looks worried and clenches his teeth. The guy feels a very strong aura and pressure. It's hard to call Valen a simple old man, and the hero can't even guess who he is. As if reading his mind, the man turns to Harold, saying that he still has not told him his title. The old man introduces himself. He is Valen, specifying the last name, Valen Myers. And by the title of a man, he is the master of the sword of the former generation. There was pride in his eyes, and his eyebrows were slightly furrowed in the middle. The young man was extremely surprised by this, thinking that the title of the sword is a powerful title. His knowledge of martial arts is rather mediocre and superficial, but even someone like him understands the meaning of the title. Now the young man understands why Cecile was so strong. She was trained by her grandfather, a swordmaster and predecessor. At this moment, the man asks if the young man is ready, but he recoils back in fear. This reaction amuses the old man. He asks what happened, because this is a great opportunity to fight a stronger opponent. Harold says that if he attacks, that's the end of it for him. The man notes that the hero is right, but if he tries to escape, the old man will not let him go anywhere anyway. Gritting his teeth, the hero thinks that even without crossing weapons with an opponent once, he feels a huge difference in strength. It is so big that the guy is ready to throw away his spear and surrender without a fight. To silence Harold, the old man says that, in that case, he will attack first. He abruptly disappears from the hero's field of view, and he does not understand where his opponent has gone. The crowd is also surprised. Everyone, as one, is asking somewhere in the void if Valen has disappeared. The hero feels something is wrong and listens to the sounds in his own inner feelings. Suddenly, the guy feels a strong blow and manages to block it. He grits his teeth and looks around in panic. Valen reappeared in the field of view of all people, striking at his opponent's spear, which he was able to defend himself from other weapons. Dodge someone else's sword, his feelings did not let him down. The onlookers who watched this fight were stunned. The tension of the two wrestlers was transmitted to the audience. The man chuckles, saying that it turned out pretty well, and it doesn't look like the main character saw him. The young man replies more confidently that it is. He didn't see anything. With a wink, the old man asks if Harold feels his movements, and he looks at the opponent with fear, because he is relaxed and strong, even though he continues to restrain himself. Without giving time to recover, the man makes a sharp push from the deck floor and flies straight at the main character at full speed. The guy fights off the blows. It seems to him that several Valens are attacking him at once, and all of them have swords. The young man thinks how much longer he can hold out like this. The crowd is not so surprised anymore. Everyone talks to each other, expressing admiration, because according to Valen's fighting style, you can't even say that he is an old grandfather. The hero collapses on the floor from fatigue. He breathes heavily and closes his eyes, thinking that he only had enough for a couple of minutes. Next to him, he hears a voice, more mocking and asking if the guy has cooled down now. The man does not hold any grudge against the boy at all and holds out his hand to him. The young man squints at the old man and says that it seems that yes, he has finally cooled down. Harold is standing on the deck, his gaze directed at the sky. He thinks that Valen was right and he really felt better, but he doesn't understand if it's because he was tired and that he was beaten properly. Feeling better, the young man decided to apologize to Addie. You should not always walk with guilt under your soul and invest to the maximum, because it will be best for everyone. The young man thanks the old man, saying that everything is fine now. Chuckling, the man is glad to hear this and says that hardships are ubiquitous for people. The man gets closer to the main character, saying that he has been through a lot himself. He made important decisions, goes through hardships and doubts. Even the old man tore out his title with his teeth, having gone through many difficulties on his own. Valen continues to say that there are people who claim that they have learned the truth, but this is nothing more than the nonsense of those who turn a blind eye to the hardships of life. The hero asks what could have burdened such a strong man. The old man does not look at the guy. He says that even now he is not devoid of hardships. For example, his escape becomes one of long thoughts and food for thought. Harold doesn't understand what the man is talking about, so he asks again. With a calm face, the old man says that in the near future, a war will break out on the northeastern continent, and the Empire will do everything to cover the mainland. Valen escaped from the Empire, and all this was in order to protect his precious granddaughter. After painful decisions, the old man made just such a choice. Valen shares with the young man that, having his title of Sword Master of the former generation, he still receives various kinds of information about the Empire that he had previously decided to leave. After carefully studying the incoming information about the Empire, the elder came to the conclusion that it had turned into God knows what in such a time. Meanwhile, the young man listens with interest to everything Valen says. As the old man himself says, preparing for wars, people even try to make super soldiers, says the old man, using the most terrible secret techniques. They are conducting experiments to merge ordinary people and scary monsters from the maze. Harold wondered what kind of fusion of man and monster. The image of the nightmarish creature that poisoned Mud immediately comes to mind. But, as it turned out, Cecile was telling her grandfather that she and the main character were fighting against a human-like monster. Most likely, this creation is the work of the Empire. That monster somehow managed to escape, and then he resorted to theft and robbery. It is likely that the Empire releases its creatures from the maze, but it is rare for them to escape on their own. The man realizes that most monsters are just really cruel creatures. Their strength is rather dubious. Thoughtfully touching his beard, he paused in his story. Such words cause confusion for the main character. He thinks the old man is talking as if Harold's life and Cecile's life in that battle were worthless at all, as if they were far from death. But, Harold thinks, Valen would have coped with that horror in a matter of seconds. But anyway, things are even worse on the northeast continent than they seemed, and most likely we need to hurry up and leave it as quickly as possible. The man continues to say that he must protect his granddaughter from a war during which anything can happen. It was for the sake of Cecile that Valen gave up all his friends and acquaintances. It was a difficult decision for the old man, and he is still burdened with doubts whether he really did the right thing then. The guy thinks about everything he's heard. You can't tell from Valen that he is burdened with such a heavy burden. The conclusion suggests itself. It looks like he just accepted everything. Standing on the deck, Harold thinks that perhaps heavy thoughts and a desire to cool his head are actually not so bad. So he continues to stand silently, gazing out at the endless sea. The action is transferred to the lower part of the ship, to the cabins. The young man stands at one of the doors, walks from side to side, and crumples, holding a recently received ring in his hand. Earlier, Harold had gone down to the trading floor of the ship. He looked at various jars and jars until his attention was attracted by the silver clay in one of them. The seller tells the main character that the silver clay is not without impurities, but it is from the labyrinth. It costs 100,000 in due, and if in robes 200. In addition to apologies, the young man would like to give something to Ati, and handmade crafts will be the best way to convey his thoughts, as he believes himself. The main character clarifies whether there are any tools for working with clay. The merchant replies that they are located nearby, and customers are allowed to use them. The boy in the cap asks if he will work with clay. If the main character is familiar with the manufacture, and he calmly replies that he is, because he was a silversmith for 15 years after all. This statement surprises the merchant. The young man hesitates, thinks about what words to start with. But still, he clutches the created ring in his hand and pulls the door handle, opening his room. In it, he is greeted by a maid who feeds a small snake with a spoon. When she sees Harold, she addresses her master by name and rejoices at his return. The young man becomes a little uncomfortable. He looks away and asks what the elf is doing. She replies that she feeds the echidna. That's the name of the little snake now. It is noticeable from the main character that he is nervous. He stands next to the girl and can't think of words. He clutches the ring in one hand and hides the other behind his back. The girl asks if everything's okay. Harold says he would like to apologize for what happened yesterday. And Ati doesn't quite understand why, because nothing happened. The young man quietly says that these apologies are for what he did. After all, he literally attacked a defenseless girl, hiding behind someone else's approval, and as his apology, he decides to make a small gift, gently taking the elf's hand. The main character puts a ring on her ring finger. She stretches out her hand and examines the silver ring, noting that the work is beautiful, and asks if the guy bought it for her. Harold rubs the back of his head and answers uncertainly that he made it himself, because he is not so bad at jewelry. Hearing this, the girl's eyes light up even more. She looks at the gift with close attention. Looking away, the young man explains that silver drives away evil spirits and can serve as a protective amulet, as well as drive away werewolves. Deciding to be sarcastic, A.T. adds that one such werewolf has already attacked. Letting out a laugh, A.T. says, holding her hands at the level of her heart, that she understands what her master wants to say, that Harold doesn't want to be attacked by anyone but him. The young guy nods questioningly, and his servant continues to explain, because it seems that he did not understand her correctly, because she was happy. The girl continues that the rudeness, of course, was unnecessary in places, but on the whole, he was kind to her. Her first time, which she will not forget about his affection and love. After listening to the lady, Harold was stunned by all the words of his subordinate, all the conclusions, and even became confused. Therefore, he stood with his eyes bulging. A.T. concludes that it is difficult for Tom to believe all the spoken words that came out of her mouth before. Suddenly, the elf knocks the guy down on the bed and hangs over him. The young man forgets how to breathe. He looks at his maid and can't take his eyes off her. The girl informs that since her master does not believe the words, then there is no other choice but to prove everything by actions. After that, Harold's companion abruptly and unexpectedly, forcefully kisses him on the lips. The guy does not resist, on the contrary. Such active actions are pleasant to him. The girl bends over to someone else's ear and asks Mr. Harold to let her lead in this case today. By candlelight, the characters reveal their souls to each other. The maid sits on top of the guy's stomach and moves diligently, covering her eyes. Even now, she is more concerned about the boy's comfort. She asks if it's hard for him. The guy replies that everything is fine. The maid apologizes for her ignorance, but this time she really wanted to be on top. For the most part, this was intended to make it clear to Harold that A.T. was with him of her own free will. No one forced her. That's what the girl herself wants to think. But she feels as if she's forcing the guy to do it, and the thoughts won't let her go, as well as the feeling of her own pleasure now. Ati apologizes to her master. She can no longer hold back, and the young man himself succumbs. The whole room is filled with the creaking of the bed and the screams of pleasure of the girl. Seeing this whole picture, Echidna becomes embarrassed, so she quickly crawls away, leaving the main character and the girl alone with each other. After a while, the commander of the ship informs that the entire crew will stop at the nearest island for 5 days to replenish supplies. Having found a place to dock, the ship stops and all those present on the ship can descend into the city using the lowered ladders. The main character suggests to the girl, since there is such an opportunity, to walk around the city, because maybe they will find something interesting. The elf agrees with this statement, because there are not so few people here. Something is definitely going to happen. A girl and a young man walk around the city together, noting that the atmosphere here is the same as in the departure port. But if it were a military port, there would obviously be a lot of differences. The guy asks again which military port he is talking about. 80 says that perhaps during the trip there will be an opportunity to look into one of these. The atmosphere there, according to the maid, is completely different and may surprise the main character. The girl explains that in such places everything is more strict and not so noisy. Soldiers are walking on the streets. The young man says that it all sounds scary, but the heroine adds that, thanks to them, the city is unsafe. Each place has its own character. Harold does not fully understand what the girl meant and therefore asks her again. She is embarrassed to answer, but since the gentleman asks, she will have to. I says that there can be a lot of brothels in such a place, and, unfortunately, there are often skirmishes on this basis. It happens that this is because most of the soldiers are mostly male. This can lead to a deterioration in family relations, or someone can pick up an incomprehensible infection, which promises a considerable number of patients and other problems. Therefore, the elf asks the guide to be careful not to get infected with something dangerous. After all, he is a man, and, according to the girl, he will want to visit one of these establishments. Ati shows how nervous she is. The guy, with a soft smile on his lips, says that he is not interested in this kind of joy because he has AT. The girl immediately blushes like a tomato. The young man now realizes what he said himself. Blushes no less after that, and the elf cannot get rid of her master's words and her thoughts. To change the subject, she tells the guy that she wishes him only the best. The characters walk around the port city together. They look at the boats standing by the shore, reach the fountain in the main square, and then to the bench where they are going to sit down. Sitting next to each other, the elf says that she is now calm. Harold doesn't understand what it is about yet. Here the elf decided to share her revelations. She really loved her master with all her heart. Moreover, having gathered her courage, the girl later confirmed this, not only in words. Perhaps Atai would have resisted if the young man had done this on the first day of purchase. She would not have liked this behavior. She tells all this, nervously clenching her hands in the fists. The young man notices this and only remains silent, staring intently at his companion. Hearing the words of the elf, the main character was a little worried, because there could have been another outcome. His actions could have led the girl to her own death, due to disobeying her own master. Harold remembered the question AT was asking now, looking at her. How long ago she had realized this. The girl turned her attention to the guy, rounding her cute and big eyes. The lady gives her answer that from that very first kiss, every day she realized it more and more. The guy did not show aggression towards her, a dark elf who faces many dangers on the northeastern continent. He treated her like an ordinary simple girl, which attracted her even more. The guy remembers that the elf still has a collar around her neck and stretches out her hands to him, saying that now there is no need for it. The girl asks what the main character is talking about, not about the collar. He replies that it is, though he does not know how to remove it. The elf says that she does not want to take it off, as this is proof of her belonging to the main character. A smile lights up her face. She doesn't seem to feel like a servant in him at all. The main character recalls the recent words of the elf that the collar is proof that she belongs to him, and thinks that on the contrary, he wanted to see the girl without him. Stopping at the pier, the young man looks up and sees a large cruise ship, which he noticed in the previous port. The main character realizes that most likely he has left the northeastern continent, and the image of a girl pops up in his head. The girl notices that something is wrong with Harold, asks what is the matter, but he shrugs it off, not paying attention. The next day, the young man tries to train the snake, throws her a stick and orders her to take it. The echidna quickly crawls away and catches the stick in flight, after which it drags it back to Harold. The girl looks at how the young man trains a small pet. The hero asks if AT wants to try it. She picks up a wand. At one point, a small letter is placed under the door of the heroes. The young man picks it up, reading that he and Ati are invited to visit the night bazaar. The young man understands that yesterday he did not find any remarkable places with his companion, so he is not sure that he can be surprised by something. Turning to the girl, he asks if it's worth going, and she agrees. The main character notices that there are a lot of people in the bazaar, thinks that it's about advertising. But the maid thinks that's not the only reason. The guy notices how many gambling establishments are in the bazaar. Everyone plays cards, poker, and slot machines. Harold thinks that this island is a transshipment point for ships, which is why such establishments are so popular here. Cecile is playing at one of the tables with a couple of men. Other players are against her, thinking that she is cheating, but she replies that she is just very sharp-sighted. On the street, the heroes hear a familiar voice, realizing that it belongs to Cecile. Harold thinks that the main thing is that her grandfather does not catch her doing this. At first glance, it may seem that the grandfather of the protagonist's girlfriend is a simple man, but in fact, a gambling man. The guy thinks what will happen if he finds out that his granddaughter is gambling. The young man decides that this is too much, and it is better to pretend that he did not hear anything. The maid agrees with him. The guy suggests continuing to walk around the night bazaar and enjoy the beautiful views of the streets. In the morning, Harold trains the snake again. It wraps around his body and then ends up on his head. The guy throws his arms out to the sides, and AT claps her hands, being amazed by what she saw. The hero thinks that the echidna is getting bigger every day. The snake is not able to shed its skin, so how does it grow? Harold remembers that this egg was found on a half-human, so it's not surprising that it might not be a snake at all. Suddenly, the heroes hear a shrill scream outside the door. A woman's voice asks her grandfather to let her go. Opening the door, the young man asks what kind of screams they are, and at the same moment sees a man dragging his granddaughter Cecile after him. The old man is angry. He could not imagine that his granddaughter was interested in gambling. Cecile tries to justify that it was just a prank. Moreover, she did not lose, but won. The girl brags that she had the dice in the palm of her hand. She saw through the cards, so the games became win-win. It makes a man very angry. He slaps his granddaughter on soft buns, asking why she uses swordsmanship at all. The characters look at this whole picture and say nothing. Harold's friend asks for help because she is in pain, but the guy just shrugs, deciding that it's not worth interfering. The execution of the protagonist's girlfriend continues. She screams shrilly. AT says that she even feels a little sorry for Cecile, but the young man says that she knew the consequences of her act. The maid grudgingly adds that his master's girlfriend called him by name. She's a little sulky about it. This is noticed by the main character, while not understanding the reason for what is happening. The young man pokes the elf on the cheek while she is complaining, and says that she is very cute. Adi is embarrassed. Her cheeks are blushing. The action moves on to the tavern. Two men are discussing the recent events of the morning, the fire that occurred. One of them says that the house burned down completely, and the neighboring ones remained half-burned. Harold hears all this and turns around, looking nervously. The main character thinks that, no matter how sad it is, he understands the feeling of loss of home and a sense of despair, because he himself has experienced similar events. The guy wonders if the fire was the result of negligent handling of fire or if it was pyromania. After that, he stops, deciding that there is no point in thinking about it. He will leave the island tomorrow, and local problems do not concern him. After the meal, Ati and Harold stroll through the streets, wondering if their next stop will be the Western continent. The maid suggests that perhaps they will have another transit point. Suddenly, in an alley, a young man meets his girlfriend. She exclaims in surprise, noticing the hero, and then looks at him with displeasure. The girl immediately accuses the guy of callousness and betrayal because he did not save her from her grandfather's punishment. Cecile did not expect this from Harold. Thinking about it, the hero realizes that the sun will set soon, and the friend continues to walk around the city, and this can only mean one thing. She has not learned her lesson. Like last time, the guy decided not to do anything. Seeing Cecile again, the maid begins to be jealous of the guy, saying that she is perfect and probably wants to protect her. The girl blows her lips and looks somewhere to the side. The young man asks why Ati is suddenly acting like this, but she just apologizes for her behavior, without commenting in any way. The main character decided that his maid was just not in the mood today. Once in the cabin in the evening, Harold invites his companion to admire the scenery on deck. She is surprised, but does not refuse. She likes this offer. Suddenly, an echidna snake crawls out from under his clothes and tries to say something. The guy assumes that she wants to go with him. After exchanging glances and smiling, the maid and the main character go up to the deck. From the deck, according to Harold, the night landscape of the port city seems ordinary. But the most important thing here, of course, is not considered to be him. The young man proposed this idea with the deck only to please his companion and see how she smiles. Harold is glad that the elf now looks happier than before. A young man and an elf girl stood on the deck and enjoyed the scenery of the night city stretching out in front of them. The guy turned to AT and asked with a smile on his face if they could return home. She smiled back and said she agreed with that. Turning away from the railing located at the end of the deck, the couple walked towards the place where they stopped. The girl was holding her hat, protecting it from the wind. And at that moment, the young man noticed something familiar nearby. Harold's attention was attracted by a recent acquaintance of a man who stood not far from them, arms folded, confidently looking into the distance. The girl also recognized him and thought about him questioningly. A sullen man named Wallen turned his gaze to them and said that he did not expect to see them here. The young man asked what their acquaintance was doing here at such a late hour. The white-haired man's face breaks into a smile that looks more like a grin, and he replies, grinning into his mustache, that he is waiting for his stupid granddaughter on this deck. The sly squint and the fact that the smile did not touch Wallen's eyes, as they remained cold and cunning, was noticed by the girl in the wide-brimmed hat, and the guy who stood behind made a face in disbelief. Harold Smith, with an expression of skepticism on his face, realizes that the old man seems to have guessed everything. Then he asks why he is waiting for his younger relative. Wallen's answer makes the main character perplexed, because the man says that he wants to hang his granddaughter, which raises questions and unsolicited fantasies from the hero. The old man continues that since the girl does not understand in a good way, this leaves him no choice. He will hang her with a rope and hang her so that she thinks carefully about her actions. The guy is still in shock after such a tirade by a man about his punishment for his granddaughter and asks if it's all too much. An elderly man pulls consonants and asks if Harold is protecting his granddaughter, who, in turn, embarrassed and almost crying, replies that he has no reason to do this. Wallen still looks at the main character with a sly squint, but says that his question is over. The young man looks at the elf he bought with a strange look and thinks that such a punishment is still crossing the border, but then decides that it is none of his business. Then he notices that Ati is looking at him very intently for some reason. The old man closes one eye, and with fatigue on his face, says that his younger relative is a big prankster and does not listen to him at all. A couple of heroes in the background are listening to this tirade of his. Harold enters into the conversation and informs that it is not for nothing that they say that no child knows how much he is dear to his parents. Children rarely think about the feelings of those who look after them. The elder replies that the guy's words are very clever, and he is right. Wallen complains that he tries to forgive his sweet granddaughter too much, but what she has been doing lately is too much. An elderly man remembers how he trained a girl and complains that she uses the art of the swordsman in gambling, but he did not train her for the sake of cheating. Smith understands that this is about the honor of a knight and not about gambling. Wallen is distracted and, pointing with his finger at a strange creature coming out of the girl's dress, asks what it is that causes panic in the young man. The guy, sweating profusely and not knowing what to say, convulsively replies that it's just their pet. But the answer does not quite suit an adult man, and he does not really believe them. The pet is waiting for the verdict. Wallen asks the main character why he sheltered the monster, and calls it very unusual. This causes surprise on the faces of the young man and the girl. The guy exclaims, looking at his pet, because he turned out to be a monster. The old man is very surprised that the young man did not know about his little friends belonging to monsters. Smith realizes that Echidna seemed to him just funny. He did not know that she would turn out to be a monster. Harold is surprised how cleverly Valen figured out his pet. He is not surprised by his knowledge, and says that he happened to visit the maze, and also notes that the young man's companion perfectly understood that they sheltered an unusual animal. The hero, left without a home, looks questioningly at his dark elf and asks if their adult acquaintance is telling the truth. I is very embarrassed. hiding behind her bangs, says that she thought that the young man already knows about it. The guy realizes that he was the only one who didn't even suspect anything. Harold Smith becomes very ashamed. He blushes, sweats, and closes his eyes, because he was so easily fooled. Wallen notices the guy's emotions and declares that there is no need to be embarrassed, because anything happens, he also knows several people who can tame monsters. The dark elf supports the elderly man and says that she has only heard stories about such people. But it is very rare that a monster gets so attached to a person. The guy sighs and tries to change the subject to avoid awkwardness. He starts talking about the man's granddaughter again and hopes that Cecile won't stay too long. Old Wallen again plunges into thoughts about his granddaughter. A sly squint appears on his face, and he says that yes, he also hopes that the girl will not stay, because it will be much better for her. Harold is glad that they managed to change the subject, smiles and asks if they should look for Cecile together, because naughty children need to be punished. The guy with a strained smile thinks that, unlike himself, their acquaintance is waiting for a much greater shame, which makes his soul feel lighter. The dark elf smiles at his words. At night, the streets of the city are filled with people who are in a hurry. The heroes are trying to find a girl among this crowd. The main character and the dark elf he bought walk between buildings. The girl, thanks to her data, tries to find out where Valen's granddaughter is, but does not hear her in any of the gambling houses they passed. The young man suggests that she move on to the next one. Suddenly, the blonde girl's ear catches a sound, and she pays attention to the door of one of the gambling houses. After that, she exclaims that the girl they are looking for is there. The guys pay attention to the entrance, and the guy once again clarifies whether their friend is exactly there, and then thanks AT, because without her, it would have been difficult. The guy asks if the elf wants anything. He will do everything in his power for this. The dark elf, bought by the hero with the last money, raises her innocent gaze at him and, folding her hands in front of her, says that she wants only one thing. Then he asks if she can wish for more love from the young man. The main character is very confused and surprised by her words. He looks at the girl with his eyes wide open. Adi continues to talk and asks if he is against her wish. The pair of the elf girl and the guy, who is still very confused, continued walking down the street. Harold said that he did not mind such a request from his companion. As soon as the travelers began to approach the door of the gambling house, they stopped abruptly. The guy saw something strange in the window. It made him wonder. As soon as Smith saw smoke pouring out of the window, he burst into the building shouting that it smelled like burning. The young man opened the door to the screams of AT calling him, but continued on his way into the very inferno of the fire. The whole room was on fire. People inside were fussing and trying to hide from the fire. The crowd was running away, shouting and complaining about some unknown dangerous guy who, apparently, was the culprit of this event. Two men who ran past the main character and the dark elf he bought, shouting that the same unknown guy set everything on fire just because he lost to a girl. Harold Smith tried to cover himself with his hand so that the flames would not touch him, and asked what had happened in this gambling house, and also claimed that he did not see Cecile and offered to go a little further. His companion agreed with this. The couple moved on, making their way through the flames, devouring everything around them. The main character finally saw the girl they came here for, and he called out to her. At the same time, Cecile was standing in a fighting position with a sword in her hands. Everything around her was ablaze with flames. The girl screamed at the unknown man, asking why he tripled all this. Why set fire to everything just because of a loss, and whether he was in his right mind. She complained that it was just a place of entertainment. On the contrary, Valen's granddaughters are a strange knight and a girl. The way to them is blocked by a fallen burnt beam. The unknown man claims that he is having fun. Everything matches this institution. A strange unknown guy asks if losing is not a great reason to light up a gambling house, which he called a nest. The main character and his elf companion, hiding from the smoke and fire, were finally able to see the guy Cecile was talking to, but also noticed that someone else was standing next to him. A dark-haired young man in armor pointed his finger at a friend of the hero's, and, summing up, blamed her for what had happened, because, he said, if she had lost to him, then nothing further would have happened. Cecile was still angry and disappointed. Anger was visible in her eyes, and the girl herself uttered words that meant that all the thoughts of the young man were complete nonsense. The stranger and the girl who had been with him all this time rushed to the exit and said goodbye to the girl with whom they had quarreled before. She tried to catch up with them, but then Cecile was grabbed by the arm. Harold Smith caught Wallen's granddaughter because she could get herself into even more trouble if she followed the runaway couple, which surprised her friend very much. The guy thinks about what really caused it, but he understood that he had to stop Cecile here and now. But it would be difficult to convince her to stop, of course. The consciousness of Wallen's younger relative is clouded, but even in this state, she claims that she must catch up with the stranger who lost to her. The main character is very surprised when the girl loses consciousness right in his arms. On the contrary, a couple of a young man and a girl who lost consciousness. 80 stands and watches what happened. The girl's gaze changes to an indifferent one, and she states that Cecile could have fainted due to excessive tension. Then the dark elf closes her eyes and claims that this condition of their friend is in their favor, since they will not have to waste time on her persuasion to leave the gambling house. The main character is still holding the body of a girl who has lost consciousness in an upright position and asks his companion if she had a hand in her condition. The blonde elf looks away, making him look very innocent, and says that she does not understand what it is about. The girl acquired by Harold folds her hands in front of her and makes the fire part, thereby freeing them the way to the exit. In parallel with these actions, she says that it's time for them all to get out, because there is still a fire around. The young man begins to follow the dark elf, carrying the girl in his arms, who is still in a fainting state, and says that AT is right and it probably seemed to him that she was behaving strangely. The guys go out to Wallen, who exclaims that her granddaughter has finally returned and thanks the heroes. But an elderly man is very interested in why the girl is unconscious. The guy begins to explain the situation from the very beginning. The elderly man's face looks thoughtful, but he listened to the full story of the heroes and said that he understood everything, and now he does not have to wonder why the whole city is on its ears. Cecile was put on a bench because she had not yet come to her senses. The old man, looking at all this, continues to complain, because not only did his relative get carried away with gambling, but also this is what, in the end, it led her to. The man's face changes, and a cunning and cruel look appears. He says that he will give a beating when his granddaughter wakes up, and the main character says that he still feels a little sorry for her. The couple, consisting of Harold and the elf girl, moved to the inn where they were staying. AT also agreed that Valen's granddaughter was really sorry. The blonde girl begins to address her master and say that she would like to take a bath, since she got a little dirty during the fire. Smith agrees with this and thinks that he should probably go there too. After taking a bath, Harold begins to press AT against the wall, being in a state of very strong embarrassment. The main character, still hugging the girl's waist, declares that the dark elf smells very nice. AT is embarrassed by this statement and, looking away, says that she is very ashamed. The young man gently puts his hands on the elf's head and pulls her into a gentle kiss, from which the girl's eyes close and sweat appears on her face. After the kiss, the guy sits on the bed and the girl sits opposite. Her face looks begging, so the hero asks what happened. The girl starts the conversation by saying that the guy is very kind to everyone. Ati opens her mouth and says she wants the main character to look at her more. The heroine was so carried away by her occupation that it was only after a while that she heard Harold Smith calling her. Looking up from her lesson, the girl begins to frantically apologize, asking if she hurt the hero, but he answers in the negative, saying that everything is fine. From the moment the couple got to the most exciting activity, they could only try to keep the rhythm of breathing and keep quiet. After the girl and the boy had satisfied their hunger, they fell into a restless sleep, finding the strength to only half cover themselves with a blanket. While the ship is rocking on the calm waves of the night, the main character slowly begins to float out of sleep. The young man jumps up abruptly and thinks why he can't sleep. Then he looks back at the girl sleeping peacefully next to him and touches her elf ear, forcing her to leave her slumber for a second. Harold pays attention to his pet, which, as it turned out recently, was a monster. The echidna notices that her master is no longer sleeping and quickly begins to crawl towards him. The animal climbs onto the bed and starts pulling the young man by the sleeve of his shirt. The guy is very surprised by such actions of the pet and asks what she wants and if she wants to show him something. The main character takes his weapon with him and, claiming that he has nothing to do anyway, follows the snake-like monster, says with surprise that he will walk with him. Following the wooden deck of the ship, the guy asks if the echidna wants to look at the night landscape. But his pet gets up and starts shaking his head and torso in different directions, saying that this is not what she wants. The young man begins to descend the stairs leading to the exit from the deck of the ship, following in surprise the snake, which confidently leads him down and asking if they are going to the city. As soon as Harold Smith and his pet, found on the way, leave the deck with wide-open eyes, the hero declares that this is a cruise ship. Ash begins to reach the young man, which causes great surprise. In front of the guy is a small wooden building completely engulfed in flames. This puts the main character in a stupor and makes him loudly exclaim what is going on here, still holding the weapon in his hands. Harold stumbles back and watches the semblance of a warehouse that is slowly burning down. The young man is very surprised that a fire broke out in such a place. Reasoning further, the guy thinks that there are no buildings nearby, so the flame is unlikely to spread somewhere else, especially since it looks like the building has been burning for a long time and the fire is gradually fading away. Standing and watching the fire consume the wooden structure, the young man does not understand why the house caught fire at all, because it seems that no one lives there. Smith thinks it's all very strange. The main character comes closer and realizes that it couldn't have happened so easily. Therefore, someone set fire to it. He remembers recent events and fears that a recent pyromaniac is behind everything. Harold Smith hears the clatter of armor and looks around. Behind him is a couple whom he saw not so long ago in a gambling house. They were fighting with Valen's granddaughter. The guy behind him makes a sly expression on his face and prepares for a conversation. The hero asks who this guy is, what clothes surprise him with. The stranger asks why he started the conversation right away, calls him a brute, and asks what he thinks. But Smith says he's asking just because he doesn't know. An unknown guy begins to introduce himself importantly and says that he agrees to tell the hero his name. It turns out that he, the Imperial, is the Count's third son. Harold begins to remember where he could have seen him. A moment comes to the young man's mind where an unknown elf is handed over to a gentleman in armor. All this happened during the hero's adventure in the maze, and then the guy remembers who's in front of him now. Harold realizes that this stranger participated in the recent bidding. He understands that the opponent is a count, but did not think that he would turn out to be an Imperial. An arrogant young man with pride in his voice asks Smith if it's cool who he is. The second young man does not understand what they want to hear from him, and only confirms the words of the person. On the contrary, the main character is very interested in what such an important gentleman has forgotten on this island. Now a familiar guy is happy that Harold is interested in him and says that he will answer him. The Earl's third son begins by saying that, in truth, he cannot stay in one place for long, which surprises Smith. The Imperial continues that from an early age he hears a voice in his head. The young man rolls his eyes and says that he considers his voice a divine revelation and therefore obeys him. It is this voice that is the cause of everything. The son of the Count complains that because of this peculiarity of his, he had to leave his native empire. But he has nothing to complain about because his father continues to provide for him financially. Therefore, he does not lack for anything. Now everyone present at the pier is looking at the black smoke rising from the burning building, and the Imperial continues that it was the voice in his head that told him to burn this place down. The guy's eyes become completely crazy, and he screams that if he doesn't like something, isn't interested in something, or on the contrary is funny and joyful, he burns it anyway. The Count's son, of course, understands everything, and says that society does not like his behavior. And after the arson attack in the vicinity of Lamoist, and so far, he had to restrain himself. This makes the main character understand. Harold Smith looks at the burning shack once again, and realizes that his new acquaintance set the fire there, just like in the gambling house. But then another thought arises in the hero's head. The guy says that this is just his guess, but wasn't the Imperial the one who completely burned down the house, located just in the area of the previously mentioned Lamist? A new acquaintance thinks for a second and says that such a scenario is quite possible, and he even remembers something like that. The main character's eyes widen, and all that flashes through his mind is that all this may be some kind of nonsense. But the Imperial is the one who burned down his house. The second guy asks what's wrong with what he did. Harold Smith thought that his main thought after such news would naturally be the thought of revenge. But with a sigh, he realizes that there is nothing like that in his head. Looking at the still burning house, the hero says that if we really mean the truth, then he asks a new acquaintance to forget about that house, after which his gaze becomes completely indifferent. The expression on the face of the Count's third son again acquires a cunning color, and he asks if the young man does not think that it is better for him not to mess with such a strange guy like him. Harold smiles affably and says that he is about to leave, to which the Imperial replies that he only asked him and did not threaten. But as soon as the guy turned and began to retreat from the side of the ship, a sharp sword flashed near his face, leaving a scratch on his face. The guy glances back and sees that the weapon belongs to the Count's son. He stops the main character and asks if he really thinks that he will be released alive. The Imperial, with a crazy smile on his lips, claims that he will have problems if the guy tells someone something. Smith turns his head and makes an innocent look. The wound on his cheek is bleeding, but the young man does not pay attention to this, and stammers that he will not tell anyone, still holding the sword in front of the main character's face. The Count's third son looks at him with a haughty look and says that, of course, he does not believe him. A new acquaintance of Harold mentions a great saying where it says that the dead do not speak. He also promises to fish the girl who saw him in the gambling house. The Imperial continues to escalate the situation and say that he will not see an easy death for the girl he lost to. He claims that he will leave her without limbs and cauterize the wounds. Later, the Count's third son still cannot calm down and ends his monologue by talking about the future of Wallen's granddaughter when she gives birth to a child who will become his slave. The main character does not understand how his new friend turns his tongue to talk about such vile things. Harold Smith recalls that Cecile is strong and most people can't handle it, so she would have handled this night. But after all, he just can't escape. The guy looks around to find his pet with his eyes and thinks that he needs to hide it so that she does not catch anyone's eye, but sees that she is already hiding before the young man has time to blink an eye. While the hero is distracted, his opponent uses this and attacks, cutting the air with a sword, while shouting at his opponent not to yawn. Such a drastic action brings the hero to his senses. The young man turns around and forcefully strikes the opponent's sword with his weapon, which leads the second to surprise. The Imperial retreats in a state of shock. He laughs sarcastically and says that the main character took his punch pretty well. And then Harold comes to realize one important thought. The young man comes to the conclusion that the Count's third son is a weakling, so it is useless to fight with him. Smith's opponent starts laughing crazily and trying to hit him, which the young man deftly accepts and takes away from himself, without even making any effort. The guy continues to try to hit his opponent at the same pace, saying why he just stands there and does not attack back. He claims that at this rate, the young man will simply be put under attack. The main character does not want to fight with him at all, so he closes his eyes and thinks that his opponent is not exactly a rookie. But Smith expected that he would become something like a fateful last. Harold pays attention to the elf and realizes that the problem is most likely in her, and it was because of her that Cecile suspected something was wrong. The young man gently hits the guy with the end of his weapon. He falls forward, not even trying to resist. Then the hero turns his attention to the girl and sees that she is clasping her hands in a gesture. Smith turns to look at her and sees that she is laughing maliciously, so he understands that she is happy about her master's loss. The main character thinks that the Imperial is unlikely to have treated his subordinate well, so her reaction no longer seems strange to him. The Imperial tries to catch his breath because of such a sudden attack, then holds the sword again and declares that his opponent is quite good. Then he raises his weapon and informs that he will become much more serious now. The Earl's third son runs at Harold Smith with a loud roar and tries to deliver a crushing blow to him with his sword. But the young man does not even have time to touch his opponent, as he abruptly dodges and hits the second guy on the head with the end of his spear, after which he falls to the ground, losing consciousness. The main character hopes that now he will finally be left alone, points the tip of the spear at the guy, and thinks whether to finish what he started and kill him. Harold hears a convulsive shout, and a blonde elf approaches him. She points to her collar and says that until her master takes it off, you can't do much harm to him, much less take his life. The Count's third son is still unconscious, which causes the hero mixed feelings because he does not understand what to do with him. The elf is still pointing at her collar. The young man looks once more at the body of the enemy lying in front of him in a fainting state, then removes the spear and says that he agrees not to kill him. The elf girl thanks him for this decision and also for teaching him a lesson in this way, because the girl could not even swing at him, since the collar was immediately activated due to such an action towards the owner. The stranger thanks him again and does not understand how such a weakling as her master could even end up in the maze, where he took possession of her. The girl, with disappointment easily visible on her face, says that if she were not there, The Imperial would not have been in this world for a long time. She also notices that he is such a pyromaniac. This makes her surprise the hero. While the guy approached the line young man, the girl continued to complain about her life, as well as insult her master. By doing this, she confuses Gabriel, and he thinks what a rude girl she is. Smith begins to bind the Earl's third son, saying that he is doing everything right. This action causes confusion on the face of an unfamiliar elf, and she asks what he is doing. Later, the girl begins to scream, because the young man captured her with a rope. She doesn't understand why they're tying her up too, so she thinks the guy is bullying her. The main character ties the Count's son and the elf together, to which the latter shouts that Harold has completely lost his mind, because the first guy is an Imperial, so he may have problems, and also that the collar is still on her. Smith scratches the back of his head and says he can't just turn a blind eye to his opponent in case he burns something else. The elf begins to scream that the guy does not feel sorry for her at all, while he is busy hanging a sign on the unconscious young man, which indicates that he is a pyromaniac, while the girl still calls him a non-human. Harold Smith went to the ship, but after him came the screams of the elf that he was actually not as kind as he wanted to seem. She also screamed that she would let him feed animals, so that his life would not seem sweet to him. The guy sees his pet hurrying towards him, then lets her climb onto his shoulder and says that's what they decided. In the silence of the early morning, a loud, girlish scream rang throughout the ship. Cecile, being in limbo, the girl tearfully asks her grandfather what he is doing. She says you can't treat your sweet granddaughter the way he does. A relative of Wallen complains that an elderly man uses his skills for God knows what and is addicted to God knows what games. He, in turn, replies to her that she is good herself, since she goes with no one knows where, and considers this inexcusable. The girl is very embarrassed because of the situation in which she finds herself, looks away from her grandfather and says that he misunderstood everything, and that she likes kind people and not who knows who. Wallen, indignant at her response, looks surprised and at the same time annoyed, claims that his younger relative was brought unconscious yesterday. The old man continues to complain that the girl was lucky that it was their friends who found her, because if someone else had done it, it could have ended much worse. The bound girl is very surprised by his words and asks again if Harold Smith really brought her. This causes her great indignation from the man who chastises her. The quarrel of relatives is caught by the main character. He finds a part of the conversation where an elderly man says that his granddaughter is very stupid, not only as a person, but as a swordsman too. The young man thinks that his grandfather fulfilled his promise and really hung up the girl who disobeyed him. He hears Cecile's screams, where she claims that her grandfather is as stupid as she is, because it is he who is shouting at her now, which causes his indignation has to row. The main character, on whose shoulder the echidna is still sitting, tired of adventures, stretches and thinks about going to sleep a little more. The guy asks one of the sailors who served on the ship how soon they will sail to the continent, to which he receives the answer that they will have another stop on the island, and the next one, in 2 weeks, is just his. Smith thanks the man and realizes that they have been on the road for more than 20 days. Harold leans with folded hands on the side of the deck and realizes that a lot has already passed during their journey. But he could not have imagined that he would meet the arsonist of his house. The young man puts his head in his hands and, looking thoughtfully into the distance, reflects on the words of the sailor, who said that they would have another stop. Smith hopes that everything will go smoothly this time. A pair of a young man and a girl with an elven appearance looks in surprise at the inhabitants of the island where they stopped. These turn out to be animals similar to cats, but walking on 2 paws. Harold notices that these are quite intelligent animals. The dark elf echoes him and confirms that they are able to understand human speech, and it seems that these creatures live here. The young man admires that there are animals that can understand people. His companion replies that they are completely different from their half-humans, and indeed they are rarely found. The main character hears a voice below and is very surprised. He listens to the question that says whether they need help. The guy sees a cat-like creature dressed in overalls below. It asks if travelers have arrived from the ship. Asks him not to worry, because this is a beautiful island. There are many shops here, so they definitely have to buy something for themselves. The couple says goodbye to the cat, chewing on the fish, which they were treated to by a new acquaintance. The young man is still surprised that the animal really turns out to be talking. Travelers are closely watching the life on the island. They see that cats calmly fish alone or help each other if the catch exceeds their physical capabilities. The young man looks dumbfounded by the events that are taking place on the island they arrived on, but then he hears the elf who arrived with him calling out to him. The main character is confronted by a resident of the island who, folding his paws in front of him, greets travelers and offers his services as a guide, saying that they are not expensive at all. The cat continues to describe the delights of his proposal when the guy asks if it looks like a walk through famous places, to which the stranger nods confidently and says that he will also show secret places. The young man asks what the cost of such an offer is, and the cat, thinking for a second, asks what he thinks about the 3,000 as payment. The resident of the island looks very inspired, but as soon as Harold begins to think about his services longer than necessary, the smile on the cat's face slowly begins to fade, and the first tears appear in his eyes. The cat clings to the young man's trousers with its claws and, with tears on its face, begs a couple of travelers to agree to his proposal because he has no job and nothing to live on. He also declares that they can stroke his tummy. Such words of the animal bewilder Harold Smith, and his dark elf is delighted. She even asks again if it is possible to stroke the tummy. Such a question from a girl traveling with Smith raises questions from the latter, but Ati just shrugs it off, telling him not to pay attention. After a little more thought, Harold agrees with the cat's proposal, which causes his undisguised delight and questions whether he is telling the truth. The young man recalls that the creature promised to give itself a pat, after which the latter falls on its back. The young man turns to his companion and tells her to start stroking the cat because she wanted to, and also adds that she should not be shy. The blonde girl sits down on her knees, on which a furry creature immediately settles down, telling her not to stroke him so much, but at the same time demanding even more affection. The girl claims that he is very fluffy. The main character looks at all these actions with a smile and quietly rejoices that the dark elf likes to stroke the cat. A little later, the animal begins the tour, taking the hero to places new to them, showing the sights, taking him to a souvenir shop, after which the tour ends. The guy expresses great gratitude to their guide and hands over the money honestly earned by the first, for which he receives gratitude. But the next second the cat's gaze changes. A new acquaintance of the couple is very surprised that a snake is traveling with them. He is surprised that it is a monster, and asks if monsters can be friends with people. As soon as an expression of panic appears on the main character's face, and he grabs his pet, the cat tells him not to worry and rely on him, because there is no reason to worry since he will not tell anyone anything. The creature looks once more at the echidna on Smith's shoulder and, after thinking about it, says that it seems to be trustworthy, but he is not yet convinced enough. Here, the travelers and their guide hear a loud sound, to which they turn around together. It turns out that not far from them, an unfamiliar cat is drowning in a local reservoir and calling for help. Friends of the animal that fell into the water are standing on the pier, also exclaiming and saying that it's bad. They look down and report that their friend does not know how to swim, like all cats. The heroes with a new acquaintance come closer and see that the animals are still in a panic, shouting that trouble has come, complaining that without help their friend will drown. Harold Smith understands that he has to help. He drops his bag so as not to get the contents wet, tells the elf that he will be right back, and jumps straight into the water. The rescued kitten was sitting on the dock and spitting from the water that got into it while it was trying to swim out. The creature began to thank the main character cordially for saving him. The young man sat and listened to this, while the dark elf was drying him with a towel. The next second, Harold was attacked by other cats who were friends of the rescued animal and began to hug him, asking him to accept their gratitude too. The cat, who had previously acted as the couple's guide, saw the whole picture, then approached the guy and said that he seemed to be a really good person, and after what he saw, he was convinced of it once again. Because the hero saved a resident of the island, the guide, having created a mysterious appearance, began to say that he would take the guys to a place that he had never shown anyone before. With his words, the cat caused surprise both on the face of the young man and on the face of the blonde girl, and they once again clarified whether he really wanted to take them to a secret place. The animal confirmed his words and said that he wanted them to talk to someone. The guide claimed that there is someone who does not like to show himself to people and talks only to himself. Still surprised, Adie and Harold looked at the cat and continued to listen to his words, that the unknown should talk to someone other than him, so he thought that she would not mind talking to them. The dark elf looked attentively at her master, and he asked the cat what they needed to do to meet the mysterious friend of their acquaintance, after which the cat meowed, as if telling them to go after him. The heroes walked along the slope of the mountain, located on the outskirts of the island near the sea. They carefully stepped along a narrow path under the words of the guide that they need to be careful, otherwise they will fall. The cat began to escalate the situation by telling stories about the devil who lives at the bottom of the slope in the castle. He continued that if the guys fell down by carelessness, they would not be able to return, but this is considered superstition. But after a second, the animal's muzzle smooths out. A smile appears on it, and he innocently says that the couple should not allow themselves to be fooled by such tales. Sometime later, a group of travelers and their guide stopped, coming out on a fairly flat place. The cat said they'd come to the right place. The main character, the elf and the cat, stopped on the shore of the bay, enjoying its views. The young man drew his attention to the fact that there was no one where they came from, but the cat, pointing to the water, said that a mermaid would come to them now, with whom the guys had to talk. This news stunned a couple of tourists. The guy asked in surprise if the mermaid should definitely come to them. The girl also said that she had never met them before. Ati said that in the past, she had once heard that there was a lake on the lower level of the maze, where they had been before, in which mermaids live, but she never knew that they could be on the surface. The main character thought about the words of his companion and repeated her words in his head once again, and then thought that what they were going to meet might be a monster that had escaped from the maze. The cat stood up for his friend and proudly declared that the one he wants to introduce to his new friends is just a local mermaid who sailed to the island from the far south. The creature continued to enthusiastically say that the mermaid is very peaceful and knows how to talk. Later, the cat winked at the young man and asked the latter not to worry and rely on him. Immediately, there was a splash of water. A mermaid appeared from the depths, stirring up the quiet sea surface, straightening her hair, throwing it back, looking at the guests who came to her. The animal immediately ran towards his girlfriend, meowing. The cat called a girl named Annanella and joyfully announced that she had sailed to meet him today. The girl, sitting on a rock, agreed with his words and said that she thought he might come, and the weather was good enough. The next second, the mermaid turned her gaze to the strangers and asked who they were, to which her friend replied that they were his guests. While the hero stood in a stupor, having seen such a creature as a mermaid for the first time, the cat continued that he considered them good, which is why he decided to bring them here. Annanella replied that she understood his reasoning. The girl with the tail turned out to be quite polite, greeting the guests and telling them her name. The couple, consisting of a young man and a dark elf, said that they were pleased to meet and also introduced themselves, giving their names. This flattered the mermaid, and she called them quite courteous, but said that they did not seem very surprised. Suddenly, a butterfly landed on the girl's hand with a tail from nowhere, as if burning with fire. She didn't surprise Annanella, but she did surprise the guy's face. Gabrielle turns a puzzled look at the elf standing on her right shoulder. She looks very confused and begins to apologize. Adi, looking away, says that it was her butterfly. The mermaid, still holding the insect on her finger, claims that it looks like witchcraft to test for hostility or something like it, then asks if the girl's doubts have been dispelled. The dark elf said she didn't feel any threat. If she offended a mermaid with this action, then she apologizes for it. The girl sitting on the stone said that she did not see anything terrible in her actions because the second girl did not attack her. She just wanted to know if the cat's friend was someone bad. The main character smiles and, adjusting the Panama hat on the blonde girl, says that he is sure that the girl did not mean anything bad. The mermaid asks not to think about these events, informs that everything is fine, since her friend Sabani said that they are good guys. Then that's really how it is. The next second, Sabani stands between the talking guys with a question. Why are they just standing there? Then raises his paws up and says that they should start having fun chatting. The guide sits on a log with the mermaid and tells one of his stories. The mermaid laughs at him and says that he is very funny. From her words, the animal is very embarrassed, and the guys sitting opposite laugh at him. The young man understands that at first it was very awkward for them to talk to new acquaintances, but in the end, they talked without any hesitation. And he also notices that the place they found themselves in is very beautiful. The main character gets up from his seat and asks the cat and the mermaid to let him and his elf admire the scenery, since they found themselves in such a beautiful place. After that, The couple walks to the very edge of the shore and enjoys the beautiful scenery. Standing near the water, a blonde girl pronounces the name of her master and asks for forgiveness for acting very willfully. The young man says that Ati has nothing to apologize for, because it was done for their safety. Harold is not capable of such a thing, so he thanks the elf. The girl, in turn, notices that the mermaid is also strong. Because she noticed her magic with some kind of organ or special skill, the hero looks away and shyly says that it would be good if he could do it, because it would be very useful. But the blonde notices that the guy has her for this and asks, they say, "Isn't that enough?" The girl's words make Harold Smith look confused and confused. He answers the question in the negative and thanks his companion once again for her caution. From continuing the conversation, the couple is distracted by the loud meowing of their new acquaintance, and an exclamation indicating whether he is being told the truth. The mermaid says the words that the place from the legends that the cat told really exists. The very place from the legends is the castle at the bottom of the sea. The animal is still stunned by such wonderful news and continues to exclaim joyfully that the castle at the bottom of the sea really exists. Annanella continues her story about how she became interested and she looked inside and someone was already there. The cat wonders if the devil himself was there. With these words, he makes the girl with the tail think and answer her friend that she does not know who was there, the devil or someone else, remembering who she saw and imagining his silhouette. The mermaid accurately asserts that the stranger's aura was by no means benevolent. The words of her friend cause panic in the cat, and he says that the first thing he must do is warn all the inhabitants of the island about the danger. Annanella calls out to him, shouting at him twice to stop. Of course, she does not see anything wrong with him telling about all the residents. But how will he explain to them where he got such information? Because then he will have to tell about the girl with the tail. The cat realizes what a mistake he almost made, after which he says that his girlfriend is inherently a monster. And if this becomes known on the island, then trouble will happen. A new friend of the guys confirms the words of her friend and says that people can call her that monster or even the devil. She claims that virtue is good, but he should think about the girl's situation. The main character sees the whole situation and hears the conversation. He becomes interested. But he understands that he is a stranger here, like the elf, and it would be indecent to interfere out of pure curiosity. The cat-like creature sighs and does not understand what to do in their situation. The mermaid confirms his words and says that it takes some time to develop a plan of action. The girl with the tail raises her hand to her head and says that she does not know for sure whether that stranger is dangerous or not. So she wants to swim once more to the castle located at the bottom of the sea to make sure of this. Sabani looks kindly at the mermaid and asks her to be careful. The girl smiles at this and says that her friend is very kind, and she loves him for it. A couple of travelers are closely watching this scene. At the same time, Cecile and her grandfather are in the tavern. The girl says that he didn't have to go with her at all. The old man insists that if he hadn't followed her, she would have done something again. To which his granddaughter replies that she told him to stay at home, bringing a fork with the contents of the plate to her mouth to enjoy the taste. The girl asks why her elderly relative has a backache at all. He thinks about the answer and almost starts talking, but is distracted by the people who entered the tavern. While Cecile is enjoying her dish, sitting with her back to the door, the man sees Harold and the dark elf enter, exclaiming that the youngster has arrived. The guy greets Wallen, and he catches the attentive gaze of a blonde girl. The next second, the old man says that he knows how to keep secrets, turning his words to Ati, who entered. The elf pretends that she does not understand what is being said, smiles sweetly, and replies that she does not understand why the man uttered such words. Because nothing happened, however, she believes that this is a wonderful trait. The granddaughter of the man who spoke recently and the main character look at the talking couple in disbelief. Then Cecile offers to join the family meal to eat together. The company looks around, and the fair-haired one says that there really are a lot of cats in the tavern. She sees a race of intelligent animals for the first time. The grandfather responds to the words of his granddaughter, saying that there is nothing surprising in her ignorance, because she has not been outside the house, and he, in turn, has traveled all over the world since childhood, so he can no longer be surprised by this. The old man says that nothing has changed on this island at all. He was here 30 years ago, and nothing has changed in this place since then. Harold Smith is interested in what reason the man visited this island, asks if it is a secret. Wallen closes his eyes and, as if plunging into memories, says that he looked at this island on the way, because his wife said she wanted to go on a trip around the world. The main character is interested in where the man's wife is now. He, folding his arms on his chest, reports that she died, and the trip was her last request, since she did not have long left. The granddaughter immediately picks up the words of a relative and clarifies whether it was her grandmother, and then clarifies for the guys that she was gone before the girl was born. The young man is amazed by the fact that he learned earlier and apologizes for his curiosity, saying that it is probably not very pleasant to remember this event. An indistinct expression appears on the old man's face, which makes it impossible to understand whether he is sad or not. He replies that everything is fine because his wife was a very cheerful woman, so he would not like to get upset. The guy decides to change the subject of the conversation and informs that there is a superstition on this island, which surprises Wallen and his granddaughter very much. The girl says that this is the first time she hears about the castle located at the bottom of the sea, and the elderly man becomes more and more inspired and explains that he has already heard about it. The old man begins his story by saying that in those days it was much easier for him to move, so he went in search of the castle. This news amazes Cecile. The main character begins to ask a stream of questions, among which there are those that say whether all this is true, whether the castle's really at the bottom of the sea, how the man was looking for it. He tells the young guys that in order to find the castle, he cut the sea with a sword. This causes confusion for Gabriel and his dark elf. The man begins to squint his eyes and scratch his temple, then continues to say that he did not want to scare the local seals, so he decided to do everything at night. But it was very dark. Holding a fork in her hands, Valen's granddaughter turns to him and asks with understanding in her eyes if her grandfather is lying, but he refuses and asks why he would do that. The old man folds his arms over his chest and sighs that he has already told the beginning of the story, but the company will not get at least a glimmer of seriousness from him. Wallen says that if the guys want to know more, they have to become much stronger than they are now. The granddaughter promises him that she will try, in other words, which satisfies her grandfather. The old man decides to start a conversation on another topic, so he informs them that they will soon arrive on the continent, and, most likely, their paths will part on land. To sum up, the man decides to say that he is not sure if they have the opportunity to say goodbye, so he says in advance that he had really fun with a couple of travelers. The couple, after all, is heading to the southern continent, and Wallen and his granddaughter are heading to the western part of the western one. The old man's words evoke a sincere smile on the main character's face, and he thanks the little family for everything, and also claims that if fate is kind, they will meet again. Cecile stretches and says that their farewell is an annoying situation, because she really liked Harold, but at that moment her mouth is covered by a gloved hand belonging to her grandfather. The man looks closely at the reaction of the elf. At this time, his granddaughter begins to break out of his hands, asking what her grandfather is doing, and he says that she should not utter such words. It seems to the young man that Wallen is afraid of 80. The next day, the couple is sitting on the bed in their own cabin. The elf, being in the arms of a young man, tells him that she will be happy if the gentleman hugs her tighter. The guy agrees with her. Suddenly, the characters notice a glance in the cabin window, which is directed directly at them. They realize that it is their familiar mermaid who is studying them carefully. Harold Smith unclasps his hands, which had been on the girl's body up to that moment, and pulls away screaming, saying the girl's name. Still very confused, the dark elf and the main character do not understand what their recent acquaintance wants from them. But then AT realizes that she seems to want to talk to them about something. Quickly dressed, the confused heroes come to the beach, where they meet with a mermaid. She apologizes to them for interrupting. The guys say that everything is fine and ask what happened. The girl with the tail turns an embarrassed look at the couple and tells Gabriel that he seems to be a good fighter, and the elf is most likely capable of conjuring, which the latter agree with. The mermaid says that during her journey she saw a strange creature that she had noticed before. At first, she thought it was as harmless a monster as she was, but after a little reflection, Annanella says that, however, now she does not think that the creature is harmless. She heard the humanoid muttering to himself that more bones are needed. The main character, summing up, asks the mermaid if she wants to ask them to help her deal with this creature. He asks if she wants to force a fight on him. The young man asks why the girl should join the battle. He says it's better just not to swim there. This causes an offended expression of surprise on the face of the tailed girl. After listening to the guy, the girl loudly beats her tail on the water surface and shouts that in this case, her furry friend may be in big trouble. The mermaid glares furiously at the couple who are standing in front of her. The elf is ready to rush to protect her master at any moment. She has already prepared a gun for this. The water inhabitant comes to realize that she has done something wrong. Ananella screams and begins to apologize to the couple. The young man, standing in front of the dark elf, who was ready to rush into battle at any moment, said that it was okay. He himself did not think about what he was saying. Harold understands that friends cannot be left in the lurch. The tailed girl tilts her head and puts her hand to her chest. She cordially asks her new friends to save Sabani, because he is very dear to her. The mermaid, still in turmoil, says that nothing can replace the crimson sunsets that she watched on this coast with her tailed friend. The main character looks very impressed and excited by Ananella's words. He turns his gaze to the girl who was talking before and sees tears welling up in her eyes. The dark elf, who had remained silent up to this point, turns her gaze to the owner and says his name. This causes Harold to wake up from his thoughts. The guy purses his lips and agrees that he can help in this situation. His words make the mermaid open her eyes and stop crying, and the elf, in turn, says that she will go with him. The girl, who lives in the depths, wipes the remnants of tears from her eyes with her fingers and says that she wants to express her great gratitude to Smith, while smiling with a wide, white smile. Under the sound of quiet waves, the heroes sink deeper and deeper to the bottom of the sea, being in a special bubble that does not burst even from touching. The dark elf and Harold look very surprised to be in a bubble that neither of them had seen before. It allows the couple to conserve oxygen. In it, they follow the mermaid. The elf is still looking around, and Harold, in turn, says that all this is very amazing, and he did not even know that the girl with the tail was capable of such sorcery. The main character looks up and feels the bubble in which they are located. He sums it up and says that even underwater transportation is not a problem for them, and also asks what they will do when they arrive at the castle. The girl with the tail only smiles mysteriously at Harold's words and asks him to rely on her. She claims that water magic is her element. The couple in the bubble and the mermaid who accompanies them are approaching the underwater city. The blonde girl, like her companion, looks very stunned by the picture that appears before them. The dark elf realizes that here he is, the famous castle at the bottom. The main character looks back at their escort and notices that she is starting to create some new sorcery. The couple sees that the water surrounding the underwater castle begins to vibrate with tension, and, in the next second, a protective barrier appears around the unearthly structure, similar to the one in which they are now. The young man carefully steps onto the ground when the bubble bursts around him, and says that he is very surprised by how the water around the castle has receded. Now they seem to be walking on ordinary land. IT looks very inspired and reports that she can also repel water, but then gets upset that of course not on such a huge scale as it was done earlier. The mermaid hears their conversation and says that people like her have a predisposition to water magic. But even among them, there are few creatures equal to her. The girl informs that she will have to take human form, and the next second, instead of a tail, she has legs. The blonde elf looks at such witchcraft in surprise and asks, "They say if this is also magic." The mermaid answers this question as if it is something like a racial ability. The mermaid notices that they should have been noticed by now, so they have to be very careful. A group of 3 guys carefully enters the castle gate. The young man looks around and concludes that the castle is dilapidated and it looks like it is very ancient. Then they step into a huge hall. The mermaid, who recently got legs, confidently points her finger at one of the arched openings and says that the guys need to go there. After that, they all enter another corridor, at the end of which they are greeted by a table with old dishes. Suddenly, a butterfly appears next to a blonde girl, which surprises its creator. She informs her master that the butterfly is reacting to something down the hall. Coming out of another huge arch, the 3 travelers enter a room that is very spacious, which the main character notices. But suddenly, Ati calls him by name and shouts that there is something upstairs, urging him to be careful. Literally a second later, an unknown creature attacks the young man from above, which causes him to start running away. The guy looks around and sees that there is a huge golem behind him. The main character puts a weapon in front of him and prepares for the attack he expects from an unknown creature, but something confuses him. He sees the bones. The guy realizes that the golem was given the shape of a humanoid with the help of many bones. The young man turns his head to the mermaid, who now has legs, and asks if she has seen this monster before. The blonde-haired girl replies that she saw someone else on her last trip, and not this golem. Then Harold Smith turns his gaze to the dark elf, who, in turn, stands in a fighting position, grabbing her weapon more comfortably to repel an attack at any moment, and notices that, most likely, there is some kind of caster hiding nearby who controls this monster. The golem is still aggressively looking towards the travelers, but something begins to glow on its chest. The bones part a little, and the characters see that an eye can be seen among them. This confuses both Harold and his elf. The young man is very unsure of what he has just seen. But the elf refutes his doubts and says that she noticed the same thing. She then sums it up and reports that the caster is sitting inside the monster itself. Then, in addition to the eye, a sinister smile peeks through the bones. Seeing it, the company concludes that the creator of the golem seems to be very confident in his abilities, believes that his creation is indestructible, and therefore believes that being inside it is the safest. The guy claims that until they deal with the monster, they will not get to the creator. But 80 says that he is mistaken, because there is no need for this. It is enough just to deal with who is inside. The blonde girl gets into a fighting pose and points her gun at the creature and, taking aim, makes a shot. 2 bullets are flying straight towards the golem. The bullets fall directly into the hole from which the eye and smile of an unknown person had previously peeked out. The golem begins to collapse, which surprises the main character and the former mermaid. After all the bones have fallen down, a man appears in front of the company, who is in a kneeling position and holds onto the places where the bullets of the elf hit. 80 starts to release the gun and concludes that her job is over. The young man looks at her with great surprise and says that he is very surprised by her actions. The elf reports that the company is lucky that the golem was created from bones, as there are significant gaps in such things. The young man is still stunned and asks if the end has come for this golem. The next minute, a rustle is heard, which is interrupted by the elf's monologue. She turns convulsively and raises the gun again to be ready to shoot at any second. The main character is very surprised by the girl's behavior and asks what happened. She, in turn, replies that, apparently, she was mistaken. A crazy stranger's face looks at a company consisting of a man and 2 creatures. He reports that, judging by the man's face, the question arises as to why he is unharmed. Next, the man clarifies whether he needs to do something, tell the characters his story or not. The white-haired man says only one word that speaks about necromancers. The elf explains that they often mortify their bodies and become lich. Most likely, he is one of them. The girl says that in order to deal with this, a couple of bullets will definitely not be enough. The blonde girl, looking at the remains of bones that remained after the monster, says that only a necromancer could assemble a golem from bones alone. The dark elf turns her head towards her master and explains that the only way to defeat the golem is to eliminate its core. Here a stranger interrupts her and asks why she is talking about this, and begins to talk, but he is interrupted by shots that the girl makes from her gun. The stranger, who has been inside the golem all this time, easily dodges bullets, straining only the muscles of his face, which amazes the main character. Because he reflects bullets, the men look surprised and a little disappointed. He complains that he was declassified and says that it's not interesting, and then looks back at the pile of bones and said that everything is clear to him. The gray-haired man turns his gaze to the girls and asks one of them why she understands magic, and then realizes that earlier he thought, why did the water suddenly recede so abruptly? The stranger, still standing in the pile of bones, says that this castle has been lying at the bottom for more than 300 years. He thought it would always be like this. However, a lot of interesting things have happened in the last 30 years. The man continues his monologue and tells the heroes that once in his memory, the sea was untied in half, and all sorts of strange but strong guys came to visit. The unknown man's hand points to a group of 3 associates who look quite surprised by what the gray-haired old man is saying. The main character recalls Wallen's story, which he told during lunch. She was just thinking about how he cut the sea in half, and wondering if the man meant the right person when he talked about power. A crazy smile stretches on the face of an unfamiliar man, and rage lights up in his eyes. He tells that he decided to join the fun, and for this he does not need tools. After that, he looks for confirmation of his words in the eyes of travelers. The man spreads his arms and starts shouting that he needs more, much more bones than he has now. Understanding lights up in the guy's eyes, and it dawns on him that, it seems, the legends he heard on this island turned out to be true. Harold looks back at the pile of bones that remained from the monster, and realizes that the golem consisted of bones, which if you look closely, it turns out that they are feline. With anger in his eyes, the young man realizes that many deaths are the work of a crazy man. After a short silence, the man decides to tell a team of friends a story that he himself calls interesting. The gray-haired stranger says that the castle was originally built from ordinary building materials, but then continues with a crazy smile that he has redesigned it according to his preferences. The trio of travelers look at each other and do not understand what is being discussed. But the next second, the floor and walls around them begin to move, which disrupts the coordination of the heroes. Being in a state of panic, the mermaid asks what is happening and why the castle suddenly began to move, looks at the hero, and it becomes clear to her that he has already understood everything. The man enjoys the impression he has made on the company. The mad stranger says that he rebuilt the castle with the help of bones obtained by himself. He boasts that he rebuilt the walls, floor, and ceiling using bone meal, which he created himself. He hopes the characters understand what it all means. None of the travelers remained indifferent to his words. The castle begins to slowly break away from the seabed. Arms begin to grow out of it. The characters' faces are easily stunned because the stranger reports that he can control the castle, just like an ordinary golem. As the building rises higher and higher above the ground, the man's insane laughter can be heard from inside. He informs that Gabriel, the elf, and the mermaid came to him very timely, because first he will kill them, and then everyone else on the island. The gray-haired madman shouts that the bones of the heroes will serve as an excellent material for strengthening his beautiful castle. Thanks to them, he will build an indestructible fortress. And then he snaps his fingers. After a click that echoed in silence, the man tells that his silent observation at the bottom of the sea ends today, because it's time for him to have fun in the outside world. At this time, his warriors begin to grow out of the pile of bones that remain from the golem. The stranger revels in his power and says that the second round begins right now. He says that unlike his previous golem, these guys are not so easy for the heroes to cope with. The wars he has created now are compacted to the limit, from which they are almost impenetrable. The man comes closer to the young man and says that, moreover, thanks to the huge reserves in the form of a whole castle, he can reproduce new golems indefinitely. The main character is stunned by this news, but hears a voice calling out to him. The guy sees that his dark elf is standing in front of him with a gun at the ready and tells him that these golems really do not have a core, which means that they can only be stopped by complete destruction. Sweat trickles down the girl's face from exertion, and she informs that the crazy stranger is not lying about their density, as well as that he can create them endlessly from the bones from which his castle is built. After such a speech, the girl suddenly falls silent and her face becomes very serious. Harold sees this and, with sadness on his face, informs that it will not be easy to destroy the golems. The main character notices that Ati rarely has such a gloomy expression on his face. It turns out that the situation is really very serious, and the enemy is very dangerous. After that, the golems go on the offensive. The young man begins the battle by destroying the head of the first golem that dared to attack him. But after he sees that there's no body part on him, and the next second it grows again, he concludes that there will be no end to them. The blonde elf shoots back at every monster that approaches her, while trying to hit a crazy stranger who complains that she constantly misses. The main character crouches down to evade the monster, while realizing that the castle continues to move and is getting closer to the island with each step. He looks at his spear, which has already begun to give up small pieces, and thinks that the spear, with such enemies, will not last long. The mermaid is trying to escape from the creatures attacking her, because she does not have a weapon with her. The elf, in turn, jumps away from the hands that are trying to get to her. The castle continues its movement and has almost approached the island, where the cats live. Harold's gaze turns quite angry. The castle continues its way towards the island. The golems continue to attack. The main character managed to fight them off, but his strength was slowly running out. Harold remembered that his elderly friend was currently on the island, and even if they managed to deal with the necromancer, he would surely suspect something was wrong and deal with the problem. At the same time, the guy understood that if the huge bone castle reached the island, there would undoubtedly be victims, so they had to stop him here and now. Continuing the fight, the young man thought about how to stop what is happening now, because the creatures are very persistent, and there is no end to them. If his spear breaks, it will be very difficult to fight the golems alone. The main character realizes that it's time to use a secret weapon. He thought that if he used it, he would deal with all the problems at once in a moment. But then the young man realized that his dark elf asked him not to do this anymore, asked him not to use her. During the fight, someone screamed. The young man turned around and saw that the blonde girl had been grabbed by golems and were trying to drag her somewhere. The guy starts calling his fighting girlfriend, looking at her with shocked eyes. But then a crazy man enters the conversation. He says he's already pretty tired and it's time to end this useless battle, and then abruptly takes off. Harold sees that the walls are starting to shrink, and there's nothing he can do about it. The mad stranger laughs and tells the heroes not to worry, because their bodies will certainly be useful in his business. Transferring his hand to the elf, he says that her body will be especially useful. The gray-haired man, licking his lips, says that the dark elf's body is very pleasant to touch. They call it beautiful. At this time, his golem begins to feel her, touching her arms, legs, face, and other parts of her body. The man says that she will become the most desirable corpse. All this action ends with the crazy laughter of a stranger. What is happening is starting to scare the girl more and more, who is in the company of the main character all the time, which is why the latter's eyes widen and become insane. Comfortably intercepting his weapon, which is a spear, the young man begins to call himself into the dark force, which greatly surprises the elder and his companion. Darkness is gathering around the main character. He is getting crazier and crazier by the second. His hand is gripping the spear with force, which is aimed at the villain. From overexertion, not only tears but also blood appear in the young man's eyes. The muscles on his face begin to stand out clearly. The mermaid correctly notices that something incredible is beginning to happen and watches everything with interest. The elf screams that the young man promised her not to use such a method of protection, and the extent to which anger overwhelms a young man makes an older man wonder. Unable to distinguish anything around, the young man swings his spear with such force that it cuts through the air, leaving only fragments behind, and, being an all-consuming spear, flies straight at the mad stranger. The young man abruptly opens his eyes and comes to himself, not understanding where he is. He stands up abruptly and, looking around, notices that he is on a ship he knows, so he calms down for a while. Touching his face and checking his general condition, the main character decides that he seems to have lost consciousness, and since he is here, then everything is fine. Harold sighs heavily and does not understand what happened after the battle. He thinks he's made his companion worry about himself again. But then, he looks ahead in disbelief. The young man looks around once more and does not know how to describe what he sees. The left side sees everything in black and white. This feeling causes the guy a lot of questions. The main character starts touching his face in shock. After he has figured out a little what he feels, the guy realizes that his eye has stopped recognizing colors. Still not believing in what is happening, the young man realizes that this is most likely the consequences of using that skill of wielding an all-consuming spear with which he was able to defeat the madman and his army. The guy looks up at the ceiling and tries to sort out his feelings. He comes to the conclusion that he does not regret his action, because he assumed that something like this could happen to him sooner or later. Harold sits up carefully on the bed so as not to disturb his painful body. He comes to the conclusion that this cannot continue. The consequences may be much worse next time. Looking down at his hands, Smith tries to remember when he learned this skill at all. The memories take the guy deep into his childhood. He realizes that he was able to master this way of fighting evil when his father was not yet all wounded. And the young man remembers how his father said that even his own father and son are arranged differently. So he must use his gift carefully. The guy thinks he's probably just born for this skill. The main character folds his hands on his legs and begins to doubt that this force is uncontrollable. He is sure that his father would probably have taught him, even if he had denied it. While the young man is in thought, a voice is heard calling him from behind the door. It snaps the guy out of his memories. The blonde elf, a little embarrassed, carefully looks out from behind the door that leads into the room. She asks to tell the gentleman if he is all right. The young man is very encouraged that she came to him. He is glad to see her. The guy, seeing that the girl does not dare to enter their room, begins to smile sincerely, then carefully sits down on the bed and says that everything is fine with him, folding her hands in front of her in a prayer gesture. The girl, embarrassed and closing her eyes, says that she's very glad, because everything is fine with her master. The elf continues her little questioning of the young man and asks if his ability to wield his weapon so masterfully was not the trump card he mentioned earlier. The guy agrees with her words, saying that it is. The blonde girl sits down opposite Harold on the bed and complains that she saw his weapon in action for the first time, but already realized that this is a very dangerous force. She had already told him that it was better not to use it in battle. She even made him promise. The dark elf raises his worried eyes at the young man, looking at him from under his bangs and, calming his emotions, asks him to keep his promise in the future. Such genuine concern. The guy can't disagree with her. The girl, hunched over, points her finger at the young man and says that if he breaks his promise in the future, he will feel very bad. And then she asks if he understood her. The main character considers this behavior of his partner very cute, puts his hand to his face, and, closing his eyes, says that even in a critical situation, he will look for another way out. He says he doesn't want to die early. The next second, the guy remembers what kind of question he was creating before he was disturbed by the elf. He asks her to tell him what happened after he applied his skill. The latter looks away and begins to remember. The dark elf tells that with one blow the young man struck down all the golems at once, punched a huge hole in all the walls of the castle. With such strength, he surprised the mermaid and the girl herself very much. After the guy lost consciousness due to the use of tremendous force, A.T. knelt down in front of him, trying to check if he was all right, and the second girl admired the fact that the lock was pierced through. The elf ends her story by saying that everything is settled, and the underwater castle has stopped, and the necromancer has disappeared. This news makes the young man very happy. I says Ananella wants to thank him, so when he recovers, he needs to come to the beach immediately. After the young man had fully recovered, he came with his elf to the beach, where a familiar cat and a mermaid were already waiting for him, who were very happy to see him. Longtime friends began whispering to each other, which caused concern for the couple who had just arrived. The next second, something happens that the couple did not expect. Sabani and the girl with the tail simultaneously bow and thank their savior in unison. The guy is embarrassed and says that he should not be thanked for anything because he was just helping his friend. But the kitten says that he deserves this praise. The cat begins to wave his arms joyfully and say that the young man saved him and the whole island, so he can rightfully be called the savior, because peace has been preserved on this island. At this time, the mermaid pats her friend on the head and thanks the guys for being able to protect him. She is very happy about it. Harold and his companion are very happy that everything is enough. They think it's great. The girl with the tail turns her gaze to a furry friend and asks him to start doing something. He agrees with her. All these actions cause surprise on the faces of travelers. Suddenly, the mermaid and her best friend start pulling something out from behind the stone they were sitting on before. At first, Smith does not see what they are taking out. But then, this object causes him to be stunned. A strange-looking girl turns out to be in front of the eyes of everyone present. She is dressed in a maid's uniform. Her eyes are closed. The main character recoils in indignation and asks what it all means. Sabani replies that they have prepared a gift as a token of gratitude. The hero indignantly points his finger at the girl and says that gratitude is, of course, good, but their gift is a person. Then the young man's eyes open wide in surprise. He looks closely, and he denies his assumption. Because if you look closely, and he denies his assumption, because if you look closely, it's a doll. She is very expertly made, so it is very easy to confuse her with an ordinary person. The mermaid begins to brag that after that battle, she searched for a long time in the sea for something suitable to give the young man, as a thank you for the feat he accomplished. The tailed girl says that at first she thought about a big pearl, but her furry friend dissuaded her from such a thought and said it was better to give something rare. The cat and the girl do not understand what is wrong with their act, so they smile innocently and look at the main character. The guy accepts their gift, which surprises his blonde companion very much. He says he understood why they gave him this doll, so in the end he thanks them. The couple leaves the shore and returns to their ship. Their stay on this island is over, so they climb onto the deck and hear a scream that says they are leaving. The main character and the Dark Elf are very happy that they also came to the pier to escort their ship. Later, when I return to my cabin, they stop without going inside, only opening the door a crack. Their familiar mermaid waves at them through the window located in the wall of the cabin, and then sails away. Harold looks at his companion and catches her attentive gaze. Then they move on to the gift, which was presented to them by their good friends. The guy asks what they should do with the doll, and the elf clarifies that she does not know what to do with it better. The doll sits quietly on a chair, eyes closed, hands folded in her lap. The guy notices that there is, of course, not much room for her. It was very inconvenient for the young man to refuse, so he accepted the gift. He approaches his gift and stretches out his hand to it, saying that it seems to be made of high quality, so most likely there will be collectors who will want to buy it. The next second, unexpectedly for everyone, the doll opens its eyes and directs its gaze at the young man. This scares the main character very much. The girl who was a doll a second ago starts to move, puts her hand to her mouth and says she has no idea where she is, and asks what kind of place this is. Then the stranger, who looks very innocent, looks up and sees Harold and the blonde elf, after which she asks the question of who they are.